Feels warm.
Catch 3-4, catch 3-4.
If this city manager job doesn't work out, you can always be a roadie, obviously.
Could be, yeah.
You got the
This time we'll take a silent moment for some reflection. As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Lloydminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda. I will now call move to item number 2 and ask if there's any additions or deletions to this agenda that should be made. Not seeing any, I will look to council for direction on item number 3, the approval of the agenda. Councilor McLeod.
Thank you, Worship. I move that the agenda dated March 22nd, 2021 be approved.
Look for a seconder. Councilor Hagan, thank you very much. Any further discussion? Not seeing it, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please raise your hands. Thank you very much, Councilor White. Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 4, approval of the previous meeting minutes. I'll direction to the council. Councilor McLeod.
Thank you, Worship. I move that the regular council minutes dated March 8th, 2021 be approved.
Seconder. Councilor Morrison, thank you very much. Any further discussion on that matter? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to number 5, is there any business arising from those minutes at this time that should be dealt with? Not seeing any. Item number 6 is the public hearing scheduled for the 2 o'clock hour, so we'll return to the agenda. Item number 6 is close to the 2 o'clock, or right after 2 o'clock as we can. Moving on to item number 7, new business, 7.1, city manager, and on 7.2. City manager.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. For 7.2.1, Accurate Assessment Group Major Plans, I'll ask Scott Perry to come forward and present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Scott.
Our recommendation is the council approve the sole source award to Accurate Assessment Group Limited for a 4-year contract, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. The assessment taxation team has identified a need to enter into an agreement with Accurate Assessment Group to aid the assessment of major plans. Accurate Assessment Group has been assisting the city of Lloydminster with the assessment of major plans since fall of 2020. Administration identified some discrepancies with the assessment of the major plans, and due to time restraints, that we reached out to an external property assessment group to investigate the matter. Since that time, it has been agreed to by the property owners and the city that a full review of those properties are required. Administration would like to enter a contract with Accurate Assessment Groups on a part-time basis to have them complete the review. Review will ensure that the city is assessing the major plans in a fair and equitable manner, and that all components of the property are included in the evaluation. Pricing is for 2021, 25,000, 22, 25,500, 23, 26,000, 24, 26,500. Pricing will include the contractor providing all materials, equipment, and assuming travel and related costs. They will work with the city assessor in regards to relating any appeals and would arise because of the assessment orders. This cost would also include the annual assessment and any expansion of the plans up to a permitted cost of $7 million per year. Any expansion above that cost will be billed at a rate of $150 per hour. Our options that council approve the sole source award to Accurate Assessment Group Limited for a 4-year contract, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. 2, the council does not approve the award of this contract. Or 3, the council requests further information to be back for later council meeting. This is a sole source agreement, so it requires council approval. This is over $50,000 for the length of the contract, and this amount was budgeted for the 2021 budget. I'll pass back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Scott. Questions, comments? Councilor.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Scott. I have a couple questions on this one for you. So what's the current state of these assessments on these properties? If we're going through something like this, where are we at today?
Those properties, I started to review those properties last summer. During that review, I noticed that our major plants had many expansions over the years that weren't picked up by our previously assessor contractor, some dating back as far as 2010. So when I started getting into that, I realized that our team just didn't have the capacity to get working with this. So through conversations with the city clerk and city manager, we brought on a group to help us with that for a 1-year contract. Now that we're into it, we see that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Having conversations with the owners of those plants, myself, they were concerned, yes, you guys missed this new expansion stuff, but what about the stuff that we've dismantled and things over the years? So nobody really had a lot of confidence, I'll be honest with you, with where we are with these properties. So that's why we made this agreement to, our plan is over the next 4 years to do it, make sure we get all the new assessments on, all the expansions put on, and then go through, basically, for lack of a better word, take the plant apart and make sure it's all made at the end of the 4-year contract.
So at the end of the 4 years, what would be your vision on that? Since it's gonna take us this much time to get everything up to where it is. At that point, do you envision us having someone on staff that will take that and run forward? Will this alleviate a lot of the work and it'll just be caught up and we'll be able to carry that on with current staff?
But it will depend, like, our goal obviously will be to have our staff up to speed. Once it's caught up, we'll be able to maintain it easily. Depending on what happens with the Lloydminster charter, once the charter is updated, this will potentially be the property assessment. The assessment services branch of the provincial government of Alberta. Typically they do these properties, and the reason that they're not doing them now is because we're under the charter and the new MGA rules doesn't apply. So if the charter gets updated, it won't be on the local assessors at that time, it will be a provincial matter.
So something like this is almost unique to Lloydminster then, as far as having to go through this process with an outside contractor to take care of these things, because everywhere else in Alberta, for example, I wouldn't have to do this.
That's correct. And I've had a few conversations with the province of Alberta over the last couple of years, trying to get them to take it over, but they won't until the charter is updated.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Councillor Thorson, Councillor Hatch.
Thank you, Your Worship. I got a couple questions on this one. Some of them actually come from the conversation that just happened. So, as far as our previous contractor who did assessment, was there an expectation that they would have normally done this kind of thing, or because of the gap in terms of Lloydminster being unique as far as these things get assessed, it's just something I don't know at a certain point?
There was an expectation that this contractor should have been doing it. The process changed in 2007, I believe, where the province took it over. Some of these projects have been outstanding since 2010. Some, I guess we could say, was on the part of the plant owners because they didn't submit the information. But on the other side, the assessor didn't request it either. So don't really want to get into a name. No, anything with that. But there was an expectation that our contractor should have been reviewing and updating. For sure.
So then, as far as the city goes, and us taking, we've taken assessment in-house up to this point. To me, this seems like a fairly specialized service. Like it's not the same as your regular assessment. I'm sure some of the principles will be the same in terms of how you value things, but actually having the specialized knowledge of different pieces of equipment and large things like that, I would assume it's fairly specialized.
Yes, that's correct, and that's the reason why the provincial government took it over in 2019, because they have a specialized branch. They changed it to what they call designated industrial properties, and so anything that fits in that group, even railroad, railways and things like that are all part of that group. We currently still do railways ourselves here. When it comes to these major plants, you've got to have good experience in oil and gas and major components, and you need to have the time to break these down and do them properly. There's a lot of cost-related costing, so you've got to use a manual and value how much this costs and then depreciate it, things like that. So there is a lot of work involved and a lot of expertise for sure.
And if Scott could just provide some comment on the, so once the charter is updated and it's included in the charter, as it is included, there will be a clause that allows us to exit out of the fund in the park.
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, they're familiar, and actually, most likely, this would be the company that would be hired by the province to do that work for them.
Well, and that probably brings me to the last question, which is going in a sole source direction. You know, generally, I don't see this as being necessarily an emergency because we've got some of the work done for this year's tax roll done. Like that's, you've got your tax roll in, so we're talking about next year. So you would have presumably a little bit of time if you were to tender it. However, my understanding is this is very specialized. There's one or two of these people who do this who are in existence in the province, are only a handful, and we've got one that already has prior knowledge of what's going on. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, this company is actually under contract with the provincial government to do a lot of what they don't have enough manpower to do themselves. The reason I put it through as a sole source is mainly because I only got one bid. I called around to many people, and they all pointed me to this group. The other assessment contractors said, no, we don't have the capacity or the experience, and they all pointed back to this group, even the provincial government themselves.
Okay, so, you know, from that, I'm more comfortable with it. You know, I generally reserve sole source for emergency type items or items where there really is no one else, or, you know, it just really makes sense for the city. But to me, there's no fire on this one, but it makes sense to go in the sole source direction based on what you're saying.
And also, Councillor Thorson, right now, we are actually starting to work on like 2021, so this company will, if this is awarded today, this company will be starting early in April to start putting together the assessments for next year. So they will.
Because it's that June 30th or July 1st date that you're really assessing at, correct?
Yeah, but they'll get in there and start getting the expenses, start working on the capital projects that are in there, and start having our meetings with Husky and things like that. So they involve me with all this stuff, but they will start getting the groundwork going. So that's why I'm trying to get this contract done now, so that we don't get caught. Like last year, we did a supplementary assessment in December on this company, on both of these major plants, and we didn't have time to get all the information on, because we need to start several months in advance. So,
Well, thank you.
thank you.
Councilor Fletcher.
Thank you, Richard. Now, it sounds like it's actually a good problem to have, because what I'm hearing is that there's probably going to be a lot more assessment available for the city as a result of this, so that's the good news part of it. The other question, I guess, in terms for me is the process. So, you know, I think some time ago we talked about building permits, the issuance of building permits being triggering the other arm, the assessment piece of it. So is that connection now being established, or do these plants have to come to the city for their building permits, or do they get them externally at the province level? I'm just wondering how that's tracked and what triggers the process.
My understanding is they would have to go through our planning and building process. I think just there's some absence of that happening on some of these projects as well, so it didn't get flagged to our contractor. But so I know the one from 2 years ago wasn't permanent until we noticed it happening when we took over, and we went to our planning department and said what's happening, and they went and got permits in place then.
Okay.
So I don't know if it was a lag in time or what was going on there. So that's part of the problem. If the permits weren't drawn, then the assessor wouldn't know about it. But again, on the other side, if the assessors, if I'm doing my due diligence, I'm reaching out to these companies every year asking what's happening in the plant, so that I can, that's another way for me to know. If I contact them and they say, yeah, we just did a $50 million expansion, I'm going back to the permit department saying, where's this permit? And then that kind of leads it. It's backwards, but at least it's the ball moving that way.
There is an obligation on these plants or companies for them to get a permit from us though first though.
That's my understanding. They said I'm not really up on the processes. I know that when we mentioned last year that this was happening, our planning department reached out to the company and got the permit in place.
I mean, you don't want to penalize people for expanding because ultimately there's a benefit to us, but you certainly want a mutual respect for the laws of the city because they want to function in the city, so you benefit by the city. Thanks, sir.
Councilor Mary.
Thank you, Richard. So the change in assessment, it has the potential to actually cover the cost of this.
Yeah, this 5-year contract is always paid for the supplementary in December.
Okay. And then just the other question I have is, if the charter changes and the province of Alberta takes over the assessment, does that cover like the whole city of Lloydminster, or is it just the Alberta side?
Alberta does, we do all the assessments under Alberta. The part that the province will take over is just for the major plants, or railway and linear pipelines, things like that, and they would do it for the entire city.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but the annual assessments for residential or for our commercial properties would still be done by us internally.
Perfect, thank you.
Councilor Craig.
Yeah, it seems like it's good value for your dollar for sure with the money that's being spent on that. I'm just kind of curious about as far as how many properties, how many different companies would this fall under? What is a major plant classified as? I'm assuming it would be the ADM, the refinery.
Yeah.
What else falls under that?
That's the only two that we have in this contract. Everything else we're doing ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Whiting, do you have any questions?
No, I think everything has been answered from what I can hear here together. I'm happy with this, and they are the choice for assessment groups, so I'm happy with that.
Thank you, Councilor. Yeah, the questions I had were all answered by everybody else's questions, so thank you very much.
Yeah. And just to add to as well, City Manager just reminded me that if this was being done by the province, they do it and they actually recoup the cost back from the property owners themselves through a mill rate. We don't have that luxury under the charter. We're not allowed to do that. Last year their mill rate was 0.0760. So on a $100 million property, that's $35,000 in this. That's about $10,000 in property that they would have to pay an extra bill that they don't pay through this. And that's how the province recoups their costs from doing these assessments. They would charge the companies based on the rate. And we would collect that for them and remit that to the province. Same as the school tax.
Do we collect it for ourselves?
We are not allowed to charge that mill rate. It's only for properties that have what we call designated industrial properties. And designated industrial property doesn't exist in the city of Lloydminster because the charter doesn't recognize it.
So if the charter change, will that mean we can't access it?
So when the charter changes, then they would take over. So this contract, we would opt out of this contract. If this happened in 2 years' time, we would opt out. The province would then either do the assessments themselves or put a contractor in place to do that. Then this mill rate would apply. We would bill that to the property owner, collect it for the province, and submit it back to them.
So at least doing cuts.
Yeah, so the province it would be an extra $9,000 or $10,000 charged to say a Husky every year that goes back to the province to pay for the assessment services.
But no more to us.
We can't do that.
How do we fix that?
The charter stops us from being able to charge that rate.
It sounds like we need to change the charter.
It's always good to be at the bottom of the tree. And everything falls down. Any other questions or comments? With that, I will look for direction from Council on 7.2.1 on the accurate assessment group major points.
Thanks, Your Worship. I move that council approve the sole source award to Accurate Assessment Group Limited for a 4-year contract up to the area city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents.
Seconder? Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the question at hand? Not seeing any, I'll ask all those in favor to raise their hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Scott. Moving on to 7.3, Chief Financial Officer.
Thank you, Worship, for 7.3.1, 2020 capital carry forward. I will ask our CFO, Denise McDonald, to present.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Before you is the 2020 capital carry forward projects to be completed in 2021 budget year in the amount of $26,563,118. The audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2020 are currently underway, and a resolution is required to complete the 2020 capital work expected to be completed in the 21 budget year. The 2020 capital carry forward projects were listed in your package and requires council approval. So if we just go to that list, the list that's listed there, 6 of the projects are create 6 large projects, create most of the total, and that is 21 million. And then 5% of the projects is already completed in this calendar year, which is 16% of the number. So 34 projects are actually completed out of that list. So even though it seems like a pretty large number, 6 of those projects are large items, such as the wastewater treatment plant for 6.4 million, the east drainage channel 1.5, the fire station 8.4 million, building relocation for the LCSC 1.5, the library 1.4, concrete intersection construction 1.6. With that, I ask that council approve the recommendation to carry them forward, and I'm open for any questions.
No questions, but I think that was kind of a relief when I looked at the amount. I was worried before going to the second page, you know, are we trying to bite off more than we can chew in terms of the number of projects? But when you review the projects, yeah, that's very reasonable. So I think we're in good shape relative to not taking on more than we can. You can see the size of the project, so I'm sure we account for, as you said, the majority of the dollars that are being carried forward. So that's pretty reasonable.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to double check my numbers a little bit on the fire hall project. The total upset cost of building that project is less than what this carry forward number is. So I wanted to ask about that.
So the 1.4 is what's carried forward from the original budget. So if there's any, I guess, any additional items required under there, we still carry forward the original budget amount. The tender is a different amount, right?
So based off that, we should come in way under what we budgeted.
We should, yeah. And you'll see that there's another recommendation to reallocate money from projects complete. So when that project is complete, we would reallocate that money that was dedicated to it.
Good. That one just kind of caught my attention with the difference in the number versus what we agreed to. The upside cost was something.
Yeah, in that case, we just wouldn't borrow money. And
Right.
with the fire department one or the fire, we just wouldn't borrow the money that's required.
Councilor Forrest?
Thank you, Your Worship. So, as you were listing numbers there, CFO, how much was left as far as like the ballpark number of what was carried forward that didn't really get going much during the year? Because you did list quite a few and said like, yeah, a big percentage or a complete now or working projects that, you know, we didn't expect to. But in terms of the ones that we really didn't get much done on, because those are the ones I'm really curious about. And I believe I know the answer as to why we really didn't get moving on them as much. And I think a lot of it had to do with COVID-19. And my assumption would be that we didn't exactly get moving on some of them just because we didn't know where we were going to sit financially up until maybe September, October, where we had a pretty good handle on it. Is that an accurate statement?
Is there any particular one that you want to look at? So, just to give you some numbers, I guess. So the large projects that were carried forward, there's 80%, those 6 large can create 80% of that number. 5% are done, so then there's only 15% left to go. And of those, I can give you some of the reasons why they weren't done. Most of them are ongoing, some are multi-year projects. That was wastewater treatment plant. Equipment procured early in procurement started, but it will be completed early in 21. So some of them, because of COVID, like the vehicles, for instance, were delayed in delivery, and so then we're not going to pay it until we actually get the equipment.
Yeah, I would say there's probably half a dozen to 10 projects though we didn't get started on, and I look at the rec and culture building designs, the Bud Miller Park Center building designs, the ball diamond complex, and then the old city shop. Those are four that stand out to me. Some of that was COVID, some of it was our staff. A lot of our senior managers played an integral role in our COVID response on our IMT team, which took away them from their regular duties. So that had some to do with that, and some of it was just we wanted a little more information on the dark plan as an example, where we're going to combine it into this. We combined it in the 2021 budget. Same thing with the rec and culture building designs. We took that project. Wasn't enough money in 2020, so we added 200,000 added to the 2021 budget. So there's a few of them out there as well.
Yeah, to be honest, I don't have a significant concern with anything. It was just, I guess, once I've got that 15% number in my mind, just making sure, you know, there's a good reason for why we either didn't do it or whatever. And I don't think there's any that are dropping off the list completely and then things that we're not going to do anymore. It's just for one reason or another, couldn't get started. Or, you know, great examples was trucks. You know, some of the other ones that stand, or that don't stand out, that are just the smaller ones, which I imagine, you know, just all have their own little reasons why they didn't get done. But, you know, the long-term thinking is that last year was unique. You'll always have a certain amount of carryover. It's just a matter of fact as to when the work gets done. But just so long as keeping kind of reasonably low percentage, 15%, I guess, is a little bit higher maybe than you want to see, but it is what it is.
Questions or comments?
The other thing to note on these is there is some of the, sorry, that's for the next one. This one, I was going to go back to 2018, and that goes on the next budget, so disregard.
Councilor Whiting, any questions or comments?
Yeah, just, I think I'm understanding a bit more that it makes more sense. I know procurement of items have been a real struggle with the delays on that. And the big ones, I get that. Some of the littler projects that are there, I heard some explanation where people maybe have been pulled off, or maybe they were postponed due to COVID and that sort of thing. And I guess, kind of to Councillor Diachak's comment, do you think we're going to be, there's a variety of the medium to small projects on the list. Do you think we're going to be either short-staffed or biting off more than we can chew for this current construction season, and then looking at some of these the littler projects that are on there?
I hope that, as we mentioned in the next request, that we're transitioning to a better budget process, and we're hoping that that process will eliminate as many carry forwards as possible. I think it seems to be some of our contributing factors is we're budgeting for completion of a whole project without doing multiple years. So I think part of our training needs to be incorporating a 5-year budget and teaching our employees how to plan for those multi-year projects. So in some cases, I think some projects are put forward with the whole amount with no intention of doing it in the same year. So I think that that's part of the transition to moving to this new budget process and ensuring that we're you know, if we're planning to do it over 2 years, let's budget for it over 2 years. And I just don't think we had the capacity to do that in the past, and now we can do better.
Anything else, Councillor?
Nope, that's good. Thank you. I appreciate the input on all this. And, out of curiosity, how would this compare to last year?
I am pulling a blank, but I thought we had 19 million carried forward.
And the wastewater treatment plant was involved.
It was part of it, yeah.
Yeah, I think 18 million does service it.
And I want to say the wastewater treatment plant was 9 million of it. So if you took that out, it would be 10 million.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the capital projects. It's a great question, Councillor. The capital projects, 6 major capital projects that are all underway currently today. this, and you mentioned they were multi-year. It was an intention of, it would be great to get them done in 1 year, but simply the new firewall just didn't come together in 1 year. And I think you made a very good point, CFO. I know the province of Saskatchewan in particular has gone to multi-year, especially with road building and things like that, because it allows them to spread it over. So I think it's very important that way from that perspective. So 17 million, the city clerk just advised us last year was 17 million for that. So I think it's very important that as we move forward with budgets, that to be as clear as we can be, but I think giving the administration tools to do multi-year budgets and take into account that it will be, rather than simply becoming a carry, then it becomes a bit more budgeting, but a little bit of work from that perspective to allow it to be over 2 years from a budget perspective, and allow us to hopefully present a more uniform and representative budget so that everyone's concerned. And we know that fire health is going to cost us $8.5 million approximately. That's what the number was originally. Where it finishes, we'll see. But is it over 1 year or 2 years? It will help put things in.
Yeah, and I think there's another variable to add in there too, is that, we often rely upon grants to support us in terms of projects that we're doing. And if we see our Friday reports, we can see the list of pending. So when the government chooses to, grant funding is when the government chooses to grant funding, and that doesn't necessarily align with our budgeting time and when we want to build and spend. So there's always going to be some variance, I think, in terms of timelines when the money's available, and I get it, the other part you add into it, if it's an election year, an election's called, count with some more money being, put out there to incentivize voters to vote for the existing government in power, whether it's provincial or federal. So you're going to see some of those pieces in there. And so lots of moving parts.
So, Councilor Morrison.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. This is just more discussion. I'm fine with it overall, but I'm going to contradict myself as well and say that the danger of not taking the whole budget for when you start the project is in future years not getting enough budget to be able to finish it. So there's a risk that comes with that as well. So that is contradictory to what I was going to say. But on one where you're funding with grants and with debt, you've got a lot more wiggle room. The ones that concern me is if we've taken too much property taxes, more than, let's say, what we needed, and basically we're sitting on other people's money to a certain extent, taking more than we need. And I understand it helps us build reserves, but I like to be more intentional about those things and not just happen. So, in either case, I think it's fine, it's good based on what's there, and lots of challenges in the last year, but I'd say the finance team did a great job overall of just rounding this up and getting it to a nice even number. It makes the finance statements look really good.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. I will look for direction from council on 7.3.1, the 2020 capital carry forward plan. Councilor.
Thank you, Worship. I move that council approve the 2020 capital carry forward projects to be completed in the 2021 budget year in the amount of $26,563,118. $118.
Thank you. Secretary, Councilor Barrett. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, CFO. It is just past 2 o'clock hour, so we will return back to item number 6 on the agenda. At this time, public hearing. The public hearing scheduled for bylaw number 02-2021, land use bylaw amendments, respecting development permits. I would like to note before we begin that during the public hearing, we ask that you respect the views of everyone here and allow each person the time to speak without interruption. Each person wishing to speak has up to 5 minutes to each presentation time. If you do wish to speak, please state your name for the record and whether you are in support or opposed to the proposed bylaw. When you have finished speaking, please remain at the front of the council, as council may wish to ask you questions. All discussion of council members, city staff, and delegations shall be directed to the chairperson. Any questions brought forward by the public, which will not be able to be addressed during this meeting, will be done so at the next council meeting. Council will not debate this matter during this hearing, The decision regarding whether or not to grant the bylaw further readings will be dealt with following the public hearing. I declare the public hearing for bylaw number 02-2021, the land use bylaw amendment respecting development permits opened at 2:05 p.m. I would ask the city clerk to confirm whether or not the public hearing has been advertised in accordance with the applicable legislation and to summarize the purpose of this hearing.
I confirm that this public hearing has been advertised and notice has been provided in accordance with the applicable legislation. This public hearing was advertised in the Reading Source on March 4th and March 11th, 2021. The purpose of this public hearing is for bylaw 02-2021, being a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw respecting residential use.
Thank you, City Clerk. I will now call upon anyone wishing to speak who is opposed to the proposed bylaw. I will now ask if anyone wishes to speak in favor of the proposed bylaw. I will now call on anyone else who is affected by the proposed bylaw that wishes to speak. As no members of the public were in attendance to speak on the matter, I declare the public hearing for bylaw number 02-2021 closed at 2:06 p.m. Returning back to the agenda to item 7.3.2, City Manager.
Thank you, Worship. For 7.3.2, 2020 year-end surplus allocation, I will once again ask Denise McDonald, our CFO, to present.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So before you is the 2020 year-end surplus allocation. In 2019, we brought forward a reserves policy which was introduced in 2019, and it said that the annual year-end surplus allocation proposal would be presented for approval based on the following. First to operating reserves, then to the related department's capital reserve, and then if there was a deficit, it would be a draw on that department's reserves. Due to the COVID pandemic, the city manager and the executive leadership team proposed to set aside the reserve policy for 2020 year end due to the expectations that further losses in revenues will occur in 2021. Overall operating surplus of $2,223,759, which is 2.6% of the operating budget, is proposed to be allocated to a resiliency reserve to support 2021. During the 2020 operations, administration was quick to adjust to the pandemic challenges by minimizing cost impacts and preventing an expected deficit initially forecasted at $0.5 million. The city experienced lost revenues of approximately $6.7 million in the areas of rec and culture, $2.2 million, waste services, $0.7 million, water services, $1.5 million, general government, $0.9. General government includes franchise and concession fees, licenses, permits, investments, and penalties. The city implemented changes that resulted in cost savings measures of $6.3 million from areas of salary and benefits, $2.5, contracted services, $2.6, utilities, as in gas and power, $0.6 million. Despite the financial and operational challenges of 2020, the city managed the circumstances well due to agile staff and thinking of new ways to work. The city received financial support from the Alberta Municipal Operating Support Transfer, MOST grant, in the amount of $1.9 million, and the Saskatchewan Safe Restart grant totaling $701,829, which supported the revenue losses and additional pandemic costs. The capital budget surplus of $4,035,046 is proposed to be allocated to operating and capital reserves. This capital budget surplus is the net result of the completion of a number of capital projects that have commenced over a number of years, 18 to 20, that have had dedicated resource allocation, revenue resource allocations to it, and now can be reallocated to reserves. For the years 2019 to 2022, the city relied on cost-cutting measures to allocate unspent funds to reserves, as we had not budgeted for any allocations to reserves. As mentioned previously, the budget process will diminish expected surpluses, and we are now budgeting for reserves in 2021. Further details will be provided in the audited financial statements in April. Council can take note that these numbers are subject to change, and administration, a part of our policy is to ensure that our reserves are funded, so we can confirm with you today that our reserves are funded by stating that those formulas are true. If we go to the attachment, you will see the allocations. I'll walk you through the list of reserves. So the top categories are restricted reserves. So those are legislated for specific purposes. They cannot be used for something other than what it was designed for. And then there's a group of reserves that are unrestricted, but those ones are designated by council to support specific areas. And so we have the ending balances for 2020. Restricted reserves are sitting at 12.4 million, and unrestricted are sitting at 42. So the city manager and the ELT team have discussed the allocations, and we are proposing to put 1.5 million in the general government reserve, which is the reserve that's council designates for high priority. Protective services, 600,000. Social services and cemetery, 250,000. Planning and economic development, 100,000. Rec and culture, 400,000. The resiliency reserve would receive most of the operating surplus of $2,201,829. Special events reserve is 450. Of that, we've set aside 300,000 for the summer games approximately, and 150 for hosting events if we were to do that in the near future. Road infrastructure, 500,000, and the LCSC reserve, $231,036. So you can see the entry coming out of the capital programs. So that's the reserve we've dedicated for the current year's capital projects, and it's coming out of there because it's no longer needed and being reallocated to other reserves. I'm open for questions.
Questions, comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just overall, it's first of all great that our reserves are verified to be fully funded, because that was a concern in the past, and there was a big write-off back in 15 of 27 million of unfunded reserves, which we don't want, or 2015, yeah. But we don't want to run into those problems again too, which I understand is more of a accounting issue, but still, if we have reserves, we have to demonstrate that they are fully funded and we've got the cash back. So that's really important. And overall, great job by the team managing our contracts over the year through what was a really awkward and difficult year as far as budgeting goes. There's a lot of unanswered questions and just doing the right things when they could. Overall, I think it's impressive too that we still end up with 2.2, although some of that's going to be some of the grant funding, I assume, that comes into this 2.2 million for the operating side. But still, having 2.2 left over in operations at the end of everything is pretty phenomenal considering the year that it was. So I just say good job on how we run things. One question I do have, and I know it's been asked in the past because I know we ran into this, is the off-site stormwater. So we have spent more out of stormwater off-sites that period of time than we actually have received in off-sites. But then since that time, we started the stormwater levy, which has given us on the unrestricted side 4.8. Is there any rationale where you would clear that balance off in your restricted, the $3 million cleared off instead of 4.8? Because at the end of the day, we have the same amount of reserves. It just looks really goofy that we've got a big negative balance in that reserve.
It's certainly something we need to work on. However, offsite levies are different than levies, right? And so offsite levies, there's a certain, we have to bring forward a certain offsite levy bylaw in order to charge offsite levies to properties. And so they are not the same figure. Like maybe we'll be able, when we bring forward an offsite levy bylaw for stormwater, I believe they're working on it. Sorry, it's not my department, but I think they're working on that offsite levy bylaw to calculate that. And when that's done, then maybe we can eliminate one and just use, one is for current and one is for future, right?
What I'm asking is, so to get into a negative balance in that in the first place would mean that you would have had to have spent or not collected offsites on stormwater, one of those two. Either didn't collect it or we spent more than we actually had in that account. So it's not possible to replenish the overspent account with the unrestricted funds.
No, I don't think you can, but it's something that we are, I know we have talked to the engineering team about this issue, and we will be trying to find a way, a resolution in the future for it. It is not, I think they're different funds. The ones that are levies are current property owners get charged a levy. Offsite levy is for future growth, and that's legislated. So the funds were overspent out of that offsite levy, and so to replenish that, we have to come up with a process to do that. And it's got to be part of your calculation for the offsite levy that it's outstanding. Now it can sit there until it's replenished, but it has to be replenished. It means the city spent that money and it has to be replenished.
And they're spent on specific projects, so within offsite levies, it's spent on it within your bylaw, and within your program, you have 75th Avenue stormwater project, whatever that's not the right one, but it could be identified as that. And so you have to, if you spend the money for that project, as you collect the levies moving forward, that balance will reduce. And so that's the intent of why you can't share the money now. In terms of the one-time write-off, we have to look at that when we bring the bylaw forward. But what's happened is, it looks like the projects were completed, offsite levy projects were completed ahead of having the money available, and so that stays in a negative balance. Once you start collecting the levies, that number will turn into a positive moving forward, or will balance that number coming out. But I believe it's difficult to take one and transfer to another, I'm sure.
At the end of the day, so the restricted amount, we did more work than we had funds to do. And then work that, like the stuff actually in the ground that is over and above. And because it was chosen at the time to take that money out of that fund, now it has to be replenished only by levy funds. And that's...
Yeah, so as those projects and land develops around that, you'll start collecting the levies, which will pay for that project, or those projects that occurred.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe the project, and I'd have to go back, we did a large stormwater project back in 2012, 2013, 2014, northwest, stormwater channel trunk. They would have used funds that were in that reserve collected from offsite levies. There wouldn't have been enough there to pay for that full project. It would go into a negative, and as sites subdivide and offsite levies are collected, that replenishes that. But overall, across the city, the rate is based on collecting fees for specific projects. So once it's all been collected and once all the projects are done, that balance should be zero. I think we just over advanced that.
As well, one time you didn't have to have I'm not sure exactly your change, but it would have been around the 12-13 range when you had to specify, you had to break down those 4 different reserves before you get an offset levy reserve. with all of them included, so we're carrying a positive balance, but then now you have to separate them out in roads, storm, water and stormwater. So that was a change, I want to say probably 10 years ago now, or close to around that area, so that may have impacted that balance as well. There may have been money in the overall account at the time, and now they're individualized.
Councilor Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I really appreciated the kind of breakdown of the lost revenues. I think that's important for our residents to understand how the city responded to the lost revenues that we received. The question I had was the most grant and the Saskatchewan Safe Restart. Is that specific to COVID funding? Okay, so we wouldn't get that in another year. Thankfully, we got this year. Thank you.
So I guess just to restate, if I may, CFO, had we not received the most funding of the grant money from Saskatchewan, we would have been in a negative position at the end of the year.
Yes, we would have been at, I want to say, 422 at this time, subject to audit changes, 422,000.
Well, I think that's, no one likes to run a deficit. Last year we've had certainly of our compliment to the administration taking the measures that we did. I know it was hard on everybody in the community at various times throughout the year. This past year, facilities were closed completely. Staff doing jobs that they wasn't the first line of choice of the job. They would be assigned and they stepped up to those tasks. Some summer students who didn't have the opportunity to work with past summer for the city. But it is challenging because we're trying to be delicate. We've got a delicate balancing game of ensuring that our revenues meet our expenses. Somebody throws a curveball like we've had. And I appreciate the support from the provincial government, but I still also am concerned about going into 2021, as we know, seeing our economy, our community get back to work and all the pieces. So having a little bit of a cushion going into 2021 is appreciated. Knowing that what we don't know, there seems to be more we don't know, because people ask, when are we going back? When are we going to have events? Those are all questions that none of us that are on this table can answer. And I think the provincial government, the Saskatchewan Health Authority in particular, the direction on that is experts forward. So it's great to see that at the end of the day, I guess the capital reserve, a lot of that was, we were able to come in under budget, which is also a good thing to that reserve. And as we all know, we've got capital projects working on this year, moving forward. We've got more discussion for the next 4 years of more capital projects. And as we can see, this doesn't, the list doesn't grow quickly. It's a process here. Once a year, we're able to potentially put something to the capital reserves, which will lessen the pain for taxpayers in the long run. I think that's what it really comes down to. It's already been indicated from the government of Alberta, when it made its most recent budget, that we will see an increase in capital dollars for grant money this year, and then the axe will follow the following 2 years. We will either do less projects, or we'll be coming back to this reserve list to talk about how we continue to deliver the services and improvements that the city is looking for and requesting. Any other comments? Councilor Whiting? See your hand shake no, but I just want to confirm.
Yeah, no, just a quick kudos to administration for the hard work, and like we said, this is going to be important, I believe, for the next year or so, as we possibly see a reduction in some monies coming from provinces.
Thank you. Yeah, I think this is there's the short term and there's the long term. This is very good. I think the reserves help with the long term. It's great to see the short term, but there's also long term needs that's going to play here to ensure the viability of the targets. So, if there's no other questions or comments, I will look for direction from Council on 7.3.2, the 2020 year-end surplus allocation. Council Campbell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council approve the overall operating surplus of $2,223,759 and capital surplus of $4,031,036 to be allocated as follows. Operating reserves, resilient reserves 1-100-130, 36112 for $2,201,829.
Thank you. Can you continue?
I'm sorry, just getting it down here.
No problem.
Protective services, government, general government.
Special events.
Yeah, that's what I don't have now.
I don't know, Counselor, I think it's super made that for
Yeah. Special events, 1-700-740-36113 for $450,000. Capital reserves, general government, 1-100-130-35110 for $1.5 million. That's all I got.
Let's scroll down.
Social services.
Protective reserve.
Protective services, 1-200-250-35120 for $600,000. Social services cemetery, 1-500-550-35150 for $250,000. Planning and economic development, 1.1-600-610-35160 for $100,000. Recreation and culture, 1-700-740-35170, $400,000. Road infrastructure, 1-300-320-37112 for $500,000. LCS reserve, 1-700-761-37115 for $231,035. Additionally, that council authorizes the city manager and the delegate to amend the amounts subject to audit adjustments.
Thank you, Councilor. Second, Councilor Batchor. Any further discussion on that motion at hand? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Council. Thank you very much, CFO. And we'll look forward to those audited statements as they come forward. Moving on to 7.4, community development.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 7.4.1, Lloydminster Public Library funding allocation, I will ask our Executive Manager, Community Development Services, Tracy Simpson, to report.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon, Executive Manager.
So today, administration is requiring additional funding for the Lloydminster Public Library Relocation Capital Project to cover some unexpected expenses. So the April 2020 Council meeting, Council gave direction to enter into a lease agreement with the Lloyd Mall for the new Lloydminster Public Library space. In partnership with the library board and staff, administration began work on lease negotiations, design, and construction. Council approved a $1.5 million capital project in 2020 to cover the relocation project. The original budget of $1.5 million was based on estimated costs from the library relocation project planning consultant report from January 2020 that was commissioned by the library board. These higher costs are a result of increased construction pricing, more accurate assessments of the needs for the relocation, and unexpected unknowns in the relocation logistics. Construction costs have come in higher than anticipated, and although the removal costs have yet to be finalized, administration estimates the removal costs for the existing space to be upwards of $20,000. The initial budget for the IT equipment was $50,000. As the city IT department began the project in partnership with the library staff, it was determined that the overall network and server architecture was in need of a redesign. The city's department, or IT department, has gathered information and pricing for all of this work to be closer to $75,000, which would include utilizing some external supports to develop that network architecture. In discussions with the library just last week, they have plans to commit $10,000 from their reserves to support these increased IT costs. And it's also important to note that the library will be utilizing $30,000 from their reserves to fund makerspace and programming equipment costs that's outside the project that the city is managing, so they are contributing as well in other ways. So in the original budget, the book return was budgeted for $15,000, which was to relocate the existing unit. However, the supplier of that unit no longer works in North America, and so the ability to get support as well as materials and replacement of pieces is extremely difficult and extremely expensive. I believe they're only located now overseas. These units are extremely expensive, and very few suppliers in Canada can provide them. The new unit will cost approximately $80,000. Initially, we were looking at a 5-bin unit, which would have been upwards of $120,000. And in reevaluating the needs of the library, we reduced the scope down to a 3-bin unit. The library is also contributing $42,000 from their reserves to support the purchase of this piece of equipment. So today, administration is requesting an allocation of $175,000 from the general government capital reserve to cover these additional costs and complete the project to meet council expectation and the community need. And I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Mayor, with any questions.
Thank you very much. Is that Manager Simpson? Questions and comments? Not seeing Councilor Marion.
So I just wanted to clarify, I think I heard that the library was going to contribute $10,000 to the update in the IT. And then in this document it says $42,000 for the book return. And then in the financial statement it just shows $42,000. So is it $42,000 for both of those items?
No, so it's $42,000 plus $10,000. The $10,000 isn't included in the budget before you because we just had that discussion last week after this report was submitted.
Okay.
So it'll be a total of $52,000 from their reserves into this project.
Okay. And I think it's important to know that some of these costs we just simply, book return, we just simply wouldn't know that. We had assumed that we could transfer it over for about $15,000. And then the IT, I think that was a really good decision to take the library into, the future. And that system's quite dated already, and so just the upgrade of that, I know the city's IT department was thinking that they could manage that, but it just is a bigger project, so getting that expertise in will be good for the community long term.
Executive Manager Simpson, construction costs that are now brought forward, are they, I know that we've adjusted to brought forward and asking for an adjustment from what the consultant brought forward. That's what the whole project was based on. We have signage, book returns covered now, moving costs. Do we have some pretty firm quotes to support the budget moving this forward?
So we've started working on our moving cost pricing, and we've gotten a firm quote to move the some of this shelving and stacks that are going to be re-put into the new space. So we're still finalizing the moving budget on the actual relocation of the materials like the books. The big challenge is getting the materials out of the basement with the lack of an elevator in that atrium center building. And so we're just trying to find a company that has some fair pricing to do the work that's maybe a little bit more time consuming than expected.
Okay. So I guess the question, maybe we'll get right to the root of the question. What's the estimate of how close we can come to this budget? Because I always get nervous when we start to move the budget, and in this case, we're looking for a supplemental addition. What's the chance that we can hold to this budget?
So we feel fairly confident that we'll stay within the $175,000 extra for the total project. We have utilized the majority of the construction contingency due to a couple issues in the space that were unknown to us. One of the large ones was when we started opening or removing some of the things off the wall, and we realized that we needed to do some work around sound barriers between this new space and whoever's on the north wall, which I believe is Safeway. And so we wanted to make sure there's no noise coming from the grocery store into the library, and so that was an unknown cost. We are going to see a little bit of savings on a few other items. Last week, we awarded the furniture contract to a company out of Edmonton called Untitled, and the total is $306,221,000, so it's a little bit lower than what was anticipated. We're still finalizing a few of the pieces of furniture in that contract, and so we'll get council a firm number on that once they're finalized, but we will see a few savings in a couple other areas like that that give us a bit of confidence that the project will come in with this new budget.
Thank you. And I realize this is, we don't do this every day, so a lot of these, I don't want to call ballpark, but certainly some good, maybe higher level estimates from that perspective. So, yeah, if we've been doing this every day, I would have been a little sharper. But from that perspective, I realize that we are in a very fluid world, as we just talked about, having our own reserves, because some other things come into place. Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just as far as the entire thing, like, I guess I get it. Like, I understand. I don't think we thought of a digital move on top of a physical move when we thought of this. I'm surprised that we got all the way here and we kind of, it just sucks, I guess. It's really how I feel about it. It sucks that there's another 175 because it feels so good about this as we're working our way through. Like, yeah, we're going to get this awesome new space for a pretty reasonable cost. We're going to be somewhere that's going to be open to the public, more people can enjoy it, it's going to improve quality of life overall. We did it for such an awesome price, and it's still a good price. It's just, it's $175 less than the price, which sucks. So, at the end of the day, you know, it is what it is. I understand the bin thing, how would you have known that you can't physically move it and you won't get any support for it if you do, like, I don't know. When we were picking spaces, I'm certain that was not on anyone's mind until you went to actually go call for it was going to move it, and they said, no, we won't do that. So, yeah, it is what it is. Happy to approve it in that. I'm happy for them to finally be in that new space and it be open for the public to be in there and visiting. One question I was going to ask though is just as far as the elevator thing. So, is it just like the maintenance elevator you're working, or is the public elevator not working?
So to my knowledge, and Don might need to jump in here, but the service elevator that would be large enough to haul books up and down no longer works. And the owner of the building has no interest in bringing it back up to working condition.
Any other questions or comments around the table? Councilor Richard.
I assume that there is nothing that we can do on the current lease agreement. Is that not in the current lease agreement, that it would have a properly working elevator? Is there anything that we have for a leg to stand on there that might end up saving us costs on the relocation and moving of all that stuff? I would just be surprised that in a public library, there would be no requirement for it to be accessible to all, and that wouldn't be in the current lease.
Yeah, I can speak to that, Your Worship. Thank you. The elevator works. The public elevator works, so there's full access for all abilities of people to get down to the library. The service elevator is a significant capital cost to bring it back up to code. That needs significant amount of work. The library approached us, or sorry, not the library, the Atrium Center building owner approached us several years ago and basically indicated that this needed work. It only services the library. Full cost to remediate that elevator would have been on the city, which is probably a little bit higher than what it's going to cost us to move. So we took a stance at that point that we were going to find other ways of moving the books out versus fixing an elevator of a building that we were moving out of. So it's a significant expense we were willing to endeavor.
We have no way to utilize that public elevator to move anything.
They've indicated we could. Now there's weight restrictions and stuff on that, so that's that would be a part of the discussions with the moving company when that's negotiated.
Clear that there is still a working elevator in that building, people can get in and out of it, and maybe we can use it a little bit to move some things.
That's exactly correct.
Great.
All right, any other questions on the group? Councilor White, anything that you?
Yeah, just quickly, from what I'm hearing is that we've all taken contingency with construction has been allocated. This is a true overrun or with a couple oversights I've seen. And it's like, as Councilor Morrison said, it's kind of crafty. The IT stuff, I feel should have been maybe caught or looked at, but I'm glad that it's in here. I'm glad that we IT and all that stuff is so important. I did ask a question last week, got it in the Friday report in regards to what the quote bin actually is and why is it so expensive. And I can see what a 3-bin system looks like. I guess I'm just a little hesitant in that, I get that there's no local or North American support for that unit, but for a decent amount of money, that one is still functioning from what I understand, and it could be moved to the new spot if we needed to. And I'm just worried that we may see another overrun at some point down the road when we get into moving costs and all that other stuff. And I hear that the Executive Director said that we are pretty confident about the 175. This should be enough. But, should we be investigating that bin in order to know if we can still use it and should still use it?
So the existing bin, in theory, yes, could be moved. In our investigation with the library staff and our project team with Pete, they decided that the cost to bring people over to Lloydminster from, I'm not sure where they are, but I believe they're overseas somewhere, to bring them here to help dismantle it and put it back together would not be worth the cost given how much life is left on the unit. So the library has been saving to replace the unit in the next 5 to 7 years, which is why they have the $42,000 already saved up. And so the cost to relocate a unit that's nearing its end of life wouldn't be money well spent, in our opinion.
Okay. I understand that. Just thinking this library is important to us, and I want to ensure that it's fully functioning and it's in good view. But we're just hoping to find some leeway here and maybe looking at some other options. Sounds good. Thank you.
So just I appreciate Councillor Whiting's question. Is there potentially some salvage value in that 5-bin sorter after the library? Because that would be something the library owns would be left behind, or would be tender through the city's surplus from that perspective?
So I don't believe it has any value. We could scrap it for metal parts. But we also don't want to burden another smaller library with a system that they can't service in an affordable way or get parts for in an affordable way. And so I believe that Pete and Ron from the library have looked at all the options for that unit, and while unfortunate it is to get rid of a working piece of equipment, it's honestly the best option for it.
No, I appreciate that very much, and that's the challenge that we have is the supply, again, part of the supply chain. If someone isn't in North America to service it, we're now filing somebody across whatever country in the world they have to come from to service this, which is a challenge. So if that's all it's worth for salvage, then maybe that's all we get for salvage. Councillor Patrick.
Just to clarify, we are expected to remove it.
We are expected to remove it.
And that cost to remove it out is built into this cost.
Yeah, it's built into our removal and relocation. Correct.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. I will look for direction on 7.4.1 library, Lloydminster Library funding allocation. Councilor Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that Council allocate $175,000 from the General Government Capital Reserve number 1-100-130-3510 to the Lloydminster Public Library Relocation Capital Project number 2076000.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the question? Not seeing any. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to 7.4.2.
Thank you, Worship. For 7.4.2, Museum Exhibit Design Bill, I'll ask you all to come forward and present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Council.
Good afternoon, Joel.
So the matter museum exhibit design and build. Recommendation that council award the contract for the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center Museum exhibit design and build, Panther Creative, Port William, BC, for a total of $298,315, excluding GST, plus a 15% contingency of $44,747.25, excluding GST. This would be to be allocated from capital reserve number 2076107. In addition, that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. Some background: in 2021, LCSC will be relocating to a newly constructed rental building on a 10-year rental agreement. The new building will include an approximate 2,271 square foot permanent gallery. Over the past several years, the community has expressed a desire to have a permanent gallery dedicated to the artifact collection and the stories of Lloydminster and surrounding area. The exhibit will focus on main themes identified within the 2020 infrastructure and functional spatial needs study completed by the Cornerstone Planning Group. The Lloydminster Cultural Science Center visions 6 main exhibit zones: Journey of the Bar Colonist, Settlement of Lloydminster area, Mystic Life on the Prairie, 36 Indigenous Voices, Agriculture, and Oil Industry. Funds for the exhibit project has been allocated from the Relocation Fund Capital Project number 2076107. Installation of the exhibit will occur after the building's interior has been completed. The goal of the permanent exhibit is to build an immersive exhibit experience about Lloydminster's history. The request for proposal for the design and fabrication of the new permanent exhibit for the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center was posted on February 4th, closing date on February 24th, following valuation criteria. And there were the criteria right there. There was 5 proposals were received. Based upon valuation criteria, Panther Creative of Port William, BC received the highest total score overall. There was a few others there that again won't go through, but you can see that the total scores were fairly close on the top 2. Your options: the council award the contract to the LCSC Museum Exhibit Design and build Panther Creative of Port BC for a total of $2,908,315, including GST, plus a 15% contingency. 2, the council does not approve the award of the contract for the LCSC Museum Exhibit Design and build Panther Creative. And 3, the council requests additional information and that will be brought forward to a future regular council. I will note that under funding sources, we did provide a updated project cost to this entire LCSC relocation. So that is included as well. I am free for any questions.
Thank you very much, Joel. Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Overall, when you presented this last week, I still feel the same way. I think it'll be a great thing to have over many number of years, and given that it's all part within the budget of the big plan of moving into this new building and displaying our art and our history within our community, I think it's great. The thing that's bizarre, like just straight up bizarre, not making accusations or anything, is that all of those bids with something that's totally subjective, totally touchy-feely in a way, all came within a pretty close price. It just seems so bizarre to me. You would think maybe one would be 400,000, one would be 230, and not have a full the same understanding of the scope that they all had. But it could have been a very well written scope document. So kudos on that if that's the case. It just in general seems bizarre to me that they're so close in price with something that's so subjective. I don't know if you have any comment on that. It's just weird.
Yeah, it was a very well written RFP. We made very much sure of what we wanted. So that was probably the main reason.
Good job.
It wasn't me. It was the staff over at the museum. I won't take credit for that. Sorry, the other answer is we did provide the budget to the RFP in the RFP for that, so that's probably a bigger reason. I apologize, I forgot to have that. But that was probably the bigger reason, but it was really well written as well.
Councilor Buckley.
I'm glad you didn't say it was a terrible document. I didn't think you would. We have a couple, are these scores low? Even the high score? low comparatively speaking to other RFPs we've put out at an 84, just 185 to actually be awarded the contract. That's question one. And question two is, of course, I get the total scoring and stuff, but we've got 2 lower bids there as well. Can you give us some insight into some of this at all?
So the first question, I'm not sure I could speak to it. I think every team that looks at their proposals will score differently. So the scoring points will depend on which scoring team is looking after it. So not sure I could compare one project to the other and give you a great answer. Can you repeat your second question? I'm sorry.
2 lower bids as well. Obviously lower overall scores, but still very close. But we're not worrying the low bid here.
Yeah, I would say that going through the proposal, it was quite honest that you could tell the top 2 were just a nudge ahead and knew exactly and understood exactly what we were trying to do. Did similar projects, so it was one of the things that we've noticed, so that probably delved into that a little bit more. And capabilities of designing also played a factor in some of them as well. The top 2 are very well known agencies and firms in this kind of field.
We talked about this a bit last week as far as the finished product being able to move out of that lease space in 10 years and be reset up with possibly a few updates or something like that, but it is actually a permanent space that is portable in 10 years.
Yeah, most of the stuff we'll have to move it out, and even some of the displays that we currently have are, for example, the OTS display that is currently LCC. There are pieces of that display that are able to be moved to Lakeland College or things like that. So they will be able to be used in another location in the future.
But I would think that if we're going into the history piece of it, I guess what I'm asking more is we're going journey of our colonists, that's not changing. We know how that happened, right? The settlement, so on and so forth. But could this whole display be moved into the permanent building 10 years from now?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, just a comparison to the scoring, I look at the lean one, which we did back on March 8th. Scores were anywhere from high 70s to mid 80s, so very similar range.
Councilor.
Just a comment and not a question, but I went online to Panther Creative to look at their portfolio of other work that they've done. I think this is very exciting for our community to look at the possibility of what these exhibit zones will look like, and they do very nice work, so it would be great for us here in Lloydminster.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, it just being said, I looked at the top 2 companies when exploring the websites, and certainly if anybody wants to get pumped up and excited about the future and what the museum will look like, that's worth an easy 10 minutes just to skim through it. I mean, I get lighting and displays play a big part of it, but I know that we're currently buying a couple of 3-dimensional displays with the UV glass and all the rest of it. It's $2,300 for one simple stand. So as you're designing this stuff, it's super expensive in order to preserve the artifacts that you have in there. So take a moment, have a look, because it's very, very cool. The other part is I would suspect probably that the Russian group scored this really, really low. So that's why you have the lower score. That's an Olympic joke, all right?
Any other questions or comments? Councilor White, anything to add? Handshake and no? All right. If there's no further comments, I will look for direction from council on 724.2 to receive exhibit design and build.
Thanks, Worship. Move that council award the contract for Lloydminster Cultural Science Center Museum exhibit design and build to Panther Creative of the Port Coquitlam, BC for a total of $298,315, excluding GST plus a 15% contingency of $44,747.25, excluding GST to be allocated for capital project number 2076-107. In addition, that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents.
Thank you, Councilor. For Secretary. Councilor Mayor, thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Joel. I think you're here for one or two more, so I'll back to the city manager for 7.4.3.
Thank you. Next up, I'm just going to share the right one. That's right, external personal training policy. The recommendation that council approve number 7402, external personal trainers policy, and that council repeal policy number PR 24092711, the fire training service policy. Just doing some name changes there. Background: the current private training services policy outlines the guidelines for the hiring and does not guidelines for the oversight of external personal trainers and external fitness instructors who provide their services to clients within city facilities. Administration has recommended the name policy be changed to the external personal training policy. Following updates will assist in providing more clarity to those wishing to provide their personal training or fitness instruction services within a city facility without being an employee of the city. The external personal training policy outlines rules, expectations, training certification, permitting, and licensing and insurance requirements. The updates to this policy will ensure quality, responsible personal training and fitness instructing for clients within the city facility and will provide guidelines for the city in managing any concerns that may arise. Changes to the policy has been highlighted for council's reference and includes the addition of definition section. Previously, there were only 2 definitions. The requirements for all external personal or fitness trainers to carry a city-issued identification tag, grammatical and formatting changes for clarity, new policy template, and insurance changes for consistency. Options. The council approve all motions as indicated in the recommendation above. 2, the council does not approve policy number 740-02, the external personal training. 3, the council requests further investigation. The items be brought forward to a future regular council meeting for decision. I am available for any questions on this one.
Thank you, Joel. Questions? Council Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I have serious concerns with this policy. As we're going forward, I thought we were going to be looking at making sure that we weren't adding red tape to different things that we do with the city. I feel a little bit like this is a little like that. The other thing I was thinking about was youth sporting teams, whether it be soccer, lacrosse, hockey, anything else like that, where you have all these teams that use a mom, and the mom buys, or the team buys, training time on the track, upstairs the ag-run track or anything like that, goes upstairs, and the mom is the fitness instructor, per se, teaching these kids, helping these kids, and doing it out of the goodness of her heart, or perhaps for a little bit of financial gain, depending on the team and how it goes. That person would then have to adhere to all of these different things, which would add costs, to the parents that are using these facilities and doing these team activities. So I wanted to know very clearly, when we make a policy like this, that things like that are covered and appropriately utilized in a policy like this, because I don't see it in there as such. And we're making a broad stroke statement here with this policy, and it worries me a lot. For that reason, I've been a part of those teams where the mom has helped out, and every parent is so appreciative of the not having to pay more for extra gym time, and pay more for this and pay more for that. So the mom's doing it, but then does she fall under this category?
Your answer is those type of coaches or volunteers do not fall under this policy. This policy would be for trainers that are getting paid, fitness instructors that are getting paid, but it doesn't identify coaches. So the track club that uses our running track, the hockey club, as you mentioned, the skating club, those ones that have a volunteer coach or a volunteer mother, as you said, or father, and they're completely just going up in the track doing kinesthetics type of items, that falls outside of this policy. It's not. What does fall inside this policy would be if a team hires a trainer, or if they are doing things in the fitness center where the risk is much higher, then this policy would apply to make sure that those youth doing those type of programs and those type of training are making sure we're doing them safely and are insured. But volunteer coaches going on the track, absolutely not.
So by the same token then, the volunteer parent that's running the calisthenics and fitness portion of a hockey team, for example, goes in and buys passes for the gym portion of the service sports center, for example, is still guiding, is still leading, but has bought passes. Does that fall under this?
If they're using the fitness center and they're using items that are in the fitness center, the risk associated with that type of activity are much higher and should be on someone that is qualified and certified and has insurance to cover everything. So yes, that would be under this.
Yeah, I get that we're trying to cover liabilities and all that stuff, and I can appreciate that. But I'm still concerned about the things that could be construed as falling under this policy. I guess I can appreciate everything you said about the person who's volunteering to come out and help. They're not a coach, right? But they are volunteering to come out and help the team in some way, shape, or form. I just want to be crystal clear that that kind of activity, in any kind of activity, can still happen without having to carry the city ID and everything else that goes along with it. Because all I want is ease of use for these kids and the best available opportunities for these youth sports groups to do that. And that's why I'm concerned.
So, Councillor Buckingham, I believe the clarity is that on the track with volunteers for sports groups falls outside the policy, but in the fitness center, we're recommending that it falls within the policy.
How would field house?
Well, they would have to pay to rent that facility, and so they would be considered a user group at that point and not a personal trainer. So they would fall within the user group policy for renting our facility.
So for clarification, it's basically the arena, field house, the outdoor track, or the speed skating mobile as an example. It's basically the fitness area. And I can understand the concern.
Yeah, the policy for the most part focuses on the fitness center and the fitness studios adjacent to those.
We hear the word for the most part. That's what I'm worried about, right? We're making a policy here that's covering more, I think, for the most part. That's my worry. I have another question for after this one. I think other people have questions on this.
And this was, and I'm just thinking out loud here myself. That would apply to the aquatic center because there's a gym there as well. Where would that fall in the pool perspective? We offer swimming lessons. If somebody offered swimming lessons, would that be also included in that as well? Private swimming lessons?
We currently don't allow private swimming lessons, so that wouldn't be, but this again is for individuals that are making money, that are being paid for their services, not for volunteers, not for coaches. It's for individuals, and then of course, if you're in a fitness center and there's that higher degree of risk, then yes, that would also apply.
Councilor Buckingham, would you finish?
My other question can wait if everybody had questions around the same line of thinking that I did. You can come back to me and for the last one.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I disagree quite a bit with Councilor Buckingham on this one, in that I think that this policy is a good thing and it defines fairly well as far as what an external fitness instructor is and the external personal trainer is as well. And I think it's pretty well cut and dry from my perspective. Either way, I think that it is good that we have this policy because, if we really were having too much red tape, we wouldn't allow external fitness instructors in our facilities at all like they do in other municipalities. We're saying we're okay with this, but we do think it's important that we protect the public and ensure that the instructors are protecting themselves in terms of liability and making sure that they've got all the right pieces in place, and that we're requiring that a certain level or standard is required to be able to do this, so that not every person off the street is able to just pick up a set of dumbbells with an individual, overtrain them, and potentially have them hurt themselves. So having some standards and having some rules in place, I think is good. Does the city have their own? Yes, we do have our own, but competition is a good thing. If it gets more people into our facilities, being active, improving their overall health and quality of life, that's a good thing for our community. And having some standards to ensure that everyone's protected while they use it is a good thing. So generally, I think that, to me, this policy is more of a slam dunk than anything. Is the permitting things, the right number? I don't know what the right number is. Maybe the industry will let me know if it was way too high, but I really don't think we're asking that much. In the grand scheme of things, if you're running a business, some businesses come with costs and certifications and things like that, and there is somewhat of a barrier to entry. But if we want to protect the public, you may have to uphold some of those barriers there. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Councilor. Councilor Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So a couple of things. One is that I think when we begin to look at people that are, the moms that are going to be involved in doing some training or whatever it is, they would be already covered, I would believe, under minor hockey as being part of the team, so I wouldn't be as concerned about, any legislation and protection of that group. And they really aren't doing what, as Councilor Torsten said, they're not identifying as for-profit, I'm coming in to train you over 8 to 10 weeks, whatever it is, I'm coming in on occasion and doing whatever I'm doing. Some questions, though, I guess, as I look at it, it's on 4.3.1. So it says, well, I'll back it up. So external personal trainer, external fitness instructor shall not solicit clients or advertise their business on the city facility. So I just want to unpack that a little bit, because you're saying restricted advertising includes, but it's not limited to, wearing apparel identifies them as personal trainer, fitness instructor, coach, or instructor. So part of the confusion here, I don't think you should have coach in it. Because I think that takes us down that pathway of hockey or another sport. You're either a fitness instructor or fitness coach or something along that line, so that it's pretty clear what your role is. Coach sort of, I think in my mind, takes us into the zone where we're going, well, I'm a coach of the team, so I should be able to do it. Look, I got the jacket, whatever it is. Secondly, can they put their phone number on the back of their jacket? How do they advertise? What can they do or cannot do? So as I'm looking at that, I want to tidy it up a little bit, but I don't think there's a need for a coach in there, because I think it takes us into the territory that I think Councillor Buckingham's taken us to. But restricting advertising includes this, and I don't know. Mike's Fitness, my cell number on it. Can I wear that? And it's silly to be this picky, but trust me, there'll be people who will do it if that's what they're limited to. So if I'm wearing my t-shirt with my number, with my name, while I'm training, and I'm in the facility, is that acceptable? Because it says here I can't advertise in the facility.
Yeah, that piece was down here. We want to make sure that normal users are going to see our staff who can help them, and not some random person, right? So that was the intent of that section.
No, and I get it, but I'm just saying, trust me, people are going to find the loophole, and I'm just trying to. The poor person working at the desk or managing now has to decide, I go talk to this big brute about the fact that they have a license, their phone number on there, and they're advertising.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just going to agree with Councillor Diachuk and Torsten that I think this is the responsibility if you have a mom or a dad who are running sessions for a team, but that falls under the liability of the sport association, and that's their responsibility to make sure that they're following the protocols that are in place and that they have them registered as a volunteer, etc. I think it's important that we do this because it does offer protection of the public. And in the early days of the Service Sports Center, we did have someone come to town and offer fitness training, and we found out a whole lot of things after many people were signing up with them that it wasn't appropriate. And so my learning from that was to also look at criminal record checks, and I'm wondering if that's a consideration. I don't know if the staff that are working with people have criminal record checks done, and if we would require this for this passport thing that you're doing for the trainers.
I don't think in the policy right now we have that. Obviously our staff all go through that, but absolutely.
Yeah, I was just going to say that 4.3.1, I would just leave it as identifies himself as personal trainer or fitness instructor, period, and drop those last three, coaches or instructor. The instructor repeats itself.
Executive Manager.
Thank you. Just wanted to add a couple comments. First comment towards the criminal record check. I have to double check whether we're allowed to ask for criminal record checks for people who use your facility. So I'm not sure around whether we're actually allowed to enforce that or not. And maybe I defer to our city clerk.
I would say that would be the responsibility of the Marching Association. They should certified to have those records checked. They're not our employees, so how would we get that check and how is that check? We can ask them more questions, but
would CISA ask for that?
I don't have an answer to that, but we can look into that.
criminal record checks for the coaches, volunteers, so anyone working with you as part of a user group is not only required to get a check, but they're also covered under their insurance, like you mentioned. The other thing I'd just like to note about the weight training in specific is there's a lot more risk around youth and weight training as opposed to adults. And when someone who is still growing is using weight training, you need to be very cautious so that you're not damaging their growth and or creating injuries that create lifelong injuries. And so requiring sports groups to be a little more diligent with the people who are doing weight training in specific with their teams is not a bad thing for the city to enforce. It shows our due diligence around the safety of the youth that are coming into our facilities. It's been a problem in the past with sports groups, so I wanted to note that.
So just on that point, so but wouldn't the Minor Hockey Association and other groups have that built in? I'm thinking they do because I discovered some of the other stuff, but I could easily stand to be corrected on that.
I would say that the high-end elite teams definitely do. They hire trainers with certifications. Yep. It would be more around the we call like a rec league or a house league that may not have that skill set on site, and so having a city policy that just has an extra check in place might make them think twice about what they're doing. You don't want to limit the ability of volunteers to support their teams, but we also want to make sure that training of youth in our facility is done the best way it can.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm not so certain that minor hockey is overarchingly covered. And the only reason I say that is because, from personal experience in the teams that I've coached in the past, we hired an external trainer, right? And brought them into that facility, or we went to their facility, and it was always stated, if I'm not mistaken, that that was outside of minor hockey's purview, that that's what the team decided to do. So I'm not sure that falls under mainstream hockey's purview as a user agreement that they would have signed to use a city facility. That's the other question I have. I just don't know that it's there.
So we can double check, but I believe that provincial sport organizations, Hockey Alberta would require certain things at different levels of hockey. And so I know that the rules around AAA hockey is different than what we call house league hockey, and so I think that would be up to them to make sure that they're covered, and if they don't feel like their insurance through their provincial sport organization is adequate, they would solicit their own, or they would go to an external group that has their own, but that's not necessarily a city responsibility to make sure that they're fully, but we can double check our user group agreement and see if we feel like the language needs to be clarified.
In minor hockey, for example, with every team you get five cards for coaches, trainers, whatever. And if you want anything more than that 5, your standard fee comes with 5, or it used to years ago when I was involved. And then, but you could buy, minor hockey could buy an additional card for, if you had that 6th person, maybe an extra manager, an extra coach, depending on how many people. You could buy that extra, I think it was only $25 to do that. So it's something we could work with. That's minor hockey. I don't know where the other groups, but there's probably some things we can work with our user groups to just an awareness level to bring it to speed.
Yeah, I don't want us to be extending our reach beyond our purview. And so I mean, we're now trying to be big brother for the entire city, and I think as Councilor White has said, if you're a coach and you want to go to Club X that has their own fitness training, there's nothing that we can prevent them from doing that. That's entirely outside of their purview. So as we regulate what we own in our facilities, I think it's important for us to keep our focus around it. But I think, again, by limiting it in terms of what we've done here, I think it's a good step. We can't solve all the issues, I guess, in terms of clubs and wanting to go and do those things.
Councilor.
So just one more comment, and kind of on what Councilor Dashik said, is that if they're doing fitness training in our gym at the Service Sports Center or at the Bioclean Aquatic Center, it's very different for a mom or dad to be providing supervision than it is to be providing training. And so if we do see, you know, our staff do see that, just empower them to have that conversation and say, you know, in this facility, you need to have this level of qualification and be registered in order to provide that training. And so it's just a good conversation to have. And maybe even within the sports groups, if you see them coming in to do training within the facility, that they're made aware of what they need to do to have them in the city facility.
Councilor Buckley.
My last question, I promise. Have we looked into what this policy is going to do to cost personal trainers? What's it going to cost them to change this? Because we're talking about a group that's had a tough year, no doubt about it. What is the difference now to put them up to a $5 million liability? Like, how much more expense are we now going to put on people that do this in our facilities? And is that a consideration in this policy?
I'll let the administration answer that first.
Yeah, thank you. Most the credentials for personal training, even the most credentials for fitness instructing is already at $5 million. So their associations are already there. It's not really a rule that we're putting into place. It's a rule that wherever they're getting their certification, that's the limit they have, right? So we're just matching what their qualifications already tell them that.
Because what are we going up from? Is 3 in the previous policy? To 5?
I don't have a previous policy in front of me. I apologize. There was an increase. It might have been 2.
It was a 2, yeah. We went up 3, yeah, from 2 to 5.
Councilor.
Yeah, sorry, bursting in the seams here. I looked it up, the increase from 2 to 5 in this type of industry is $135.
$10 a month, just like every other insurance, it seems to go up.
And that's just from the one Google I did on it, it was $135. So it wasn't going to change someone's decision making, I don't think, as to whether they want to be a personal trainer or not.
And I would also add that consideration should be given to us in terms of our liability and opportunities because the insurance law is not as well. If there's a severe accident, trust me, they're not going to be suing you for $100.
Yeah, I think the other thing to remember is they're using our fitness center. It's our overhead that they're retaining. It's our equipment that we have to take care of. Those are things that the city has to take care of for a for-profit person using our facility.
So there was some noted changes a few items to go back. Is that what I understood basically? So from that perspective, the word changes being proposed, just a few little finite pieces. Is that the direction that I heard from the table? Is the administration hearing the same? The draft is already done.
Councilor White has.
Oh, sorry. Apologies, Councilor White.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I'm just listening to the comments and that sort of stuff. I personally look at this. I think this is a good policy. I think what is in place, you know, regardless of whether it's a coach or instructor, I think that is also, you know, the onus is on the administration of the staff there to again, I think they'll be able to identify whether or not it's a mom coaching a few kids around the track or if it's an individual coaching somebody in the weight fitness room or the yoga studio or something like that or wherever. And I'm happy to, with the changes that are in yellow, I'm happy to move forward with this policy as is. And I don't see the need to make these changes now. And I just want to say that, you know, if the staff or more importantly the public identifies that this isn't working for them, or we do hear some complaints from individuals, you know, I'd be happy to investigate it further at that time too. So I don't know if we'll get it perfect on this one, but I do like the changes as is.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Frank.
Yeah, I think that it is, that policy is very reasonable. I think that we need to have our ducks in a row and have, you know, protect ourselves liability-wise. anybody that's, for profit and earning those dollars, there's different costs that they incur, and this is just one of them. I don't think that it's outrageous, but I think that it's really good that we have these policies in place, and that it's something very consistent to work with, and everybody knows what the ground rules are there. So.
Thanks, Councillor. Certainly, City Clerk just advised me that wording that Councillor Dyche proposed could be just simply noted by administration, and the motion could read as amended. If this is what the motion council is, we'll just give that ability. City Clerk.
Yeah, the council is comfortable with the administration making the amendments that they propose today. We can move forward on this policy by change your motion being the council approve policy number 74002, the external personal drainage policy as amended.
Any further discussion?
And just to clarify, all we're going to do is change that 4.3.1, say personal fitness trainer or fitness instructor, and drop the rest. Okay. I'll leave it.
Councillor Marin had made that comment about the criminal record check. I wonder if it's even worth just looking into the bringing back because grand scheme of things, I think if you're working with the youth, I think that would be, if we could look into it, I think it would be important to do if we could.
So I can confirm that anyone who is coaching or working with children under any of the certifications as a fitness trainer is required by their certifying body to have a criminal record check.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor White, you got a comment?
Yeah, I just going back to that 4 foot, if we start playing with the words here, so now if I'm in the facility and working with a weight trainer or something like that, he can have coach on his shirt now, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Well, I don't know why we're changing it, I guess is my question.
I think that the change is recommended because what we want to be able to make sure is that we're able to identify someone who is licensed to be the personal trainer or fitness instructor. We have people that are coaches in hockey and baseball and whatever, and so that there may be misinterpretation of that. So what you're really trying to dial in is that when you come in, that people can see your personal trainer, fitness instructor, and I think those are typically the names that you'd also see associated with all the language that we see here, I guess, throughout the document. So the only time coach and instructor show up is in that part.
Yeah, if I may, sorry, City Manager Simpson, remind me that 4.3 really just says you can't solicit clients. 4.3.1 are really examples, right? So staff will view, when staff views things, if they're personal training and advertising personal training, then they'll react to that. If they're not, then they won't. So we can have our staff work on that a little bit.
The ultimate goal of 4.3 is that they're not soliciting business within our facility.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? All good, Councilor White, correct? Okay. No more questions on the table. I'll look for direction from Council on 7.4.3.
So we're making the motion as amended.
As amended.
Okay. Okay, let's make this motion. I can't find it. Okay, here we go. Move that council approve policy number 740.02, the external personal trainer policy.
As amended.
As amended.
Second. Councilor Torres, thank you very much. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing it. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor.
Move that council repeal policy number PR 24-09-27100, the private training services policy.
Thank you. Seconder. Councilor Spangler, thank you very much. Any further discussion on the question? Not seeing it. Call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 7.4.4, please.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, sir. Sponsorship and advertising policy. Recommendation that council approve the sponsorship and advertising policy number 130-01 as amended. And that council direct administration to create a recreation and culture enhancement reserve. Background. The amended sponsorship and advertising policy was brought to the March 15, 2021 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting and received positive feedback and minor requests and amendments which have been addressed. The policy provides guidelines for managing relationship between the city and external agencies. The amended policy allows sponsorship and advertising revenues to be put into a reserve for future enhancements of recreation and cultural facilities or may be utilized for capital expense projects. Other minor changes include an update on specific rules for advertising as well as gifting kind sponsorship. Changes to the policy have been highlighted for council's reference includes additional of 2 definition, additional sponsorship and advertising guidelines, revised section 6 to allow gift in kind to be used for contract agreements, restrictions, rewording, and additions to section 7, and formatting and grammatical changes. Options. The council approved motions are indicated in the recommendation above. 2, that council does not approve policy number 130-01, sponsorship and advertising policy as amended. And 3, the council requests further information and that this item be brought back for a regular council meeting. With that, I will open it up for questions.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you, first of all, for highlighting the changes. Appreciate it very much. Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for adding the contract piece in there. I think it was important that we did that based on last week's discussion, so it's as clear as we can make it. So I appreciate that. When it came to adding the word alcohol to 4.4, I wanted to be clear that we are not now prohibiting that. We are just saying that they must follow all federal rules and regulations. Is that the way I interpret this? Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just when we talk about adult entertainment, is there any, boundaries around what that means? Does things like a casino, does that fall within adult entertainment? Children can't really do that, so would that be within that? I just, in terms of groups that like to sponsor events and things like that, something to keep in mind. Anyway, I wasn't sure if we have a definition of that or boundaries around that. I could think of a couple other things that it could be, that we probably don't want to be advertising in the city, and that would make total sense. Just looking at the big picture.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Torres. It was absolutely not meant to be a casino and items like that. I think probably the other items that you were thinking of, it is what we were considering.
And, yeah, I guess I would agree. I would think that the definition would apply to bingo halls, restrictions, bingo halls, casinos, and things like that. Probably different from other adult entertainment items. So, does it need a clear definition? I guess that is the question. Is that your question, Councilor Torres?
Maybe I was just wrong in lumping that in with adult entertainment. Is around the table, getting some looks around the table, people going, not really. But it's pretty obvious that adult entertainment is more salacious than that in general. Is that the right word?
Could be.
I think the other thing to remember in reviewing this is that the city manager had final approval and oversight on that. Yeah. So I think that that's a good enough catch-all for safety. On your particular question, I think we would entrust our team to make sure that was done appropriately in the campus.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor White.
All good on my end, thank you.
All right, excellent. Councilor.
Yeah, if we could be more explicit, I guess I don't want us to be in the midst of some event and someone wanted to make adult entertainment, and the only piece that we're going to pull out as our ace is going to be that the city manager said it's okay. I don't think we need to put that on the city manager. Although I'm sure he'll make the right choice. But I guess you know, if there's a way to weave it in there, great. If not, then I guess, I don't know. I mean, because I think it's a good question, and I thought about it as well. And I think it would probably been even a more valid question about 5 years ago in the city. But it's not anymore. You know, on the other hand, I don't know.
I think the city clerk has been trying to provide a little bit of oversight here, and that's someone else, but Chris wants to step in. City clerk.
We're just currently looking at the definitions of what entertainment and land use bylaw.
That'd be a great place to sort of
The policy should be able to stand on its own with someone propping it up by saying, but it's my decision. That's my point. Otherwise, you don't have a policy.
let's give administration a moment here.
Sorry, I didn't hear what the city clerk said before. So.
I think it's being looked at. Knowledge services. Confirm what the
So we actually have a definition of land use bylaw, and I can read that to the council to look into that definition.
please.
So the adult entertainment means any premises or part thereof where live performances, the main feature of which is nudity or partial nudity of any person are performed as a principal use or an accessory use to some other business activity which is conducted on the premise. The purpose of this bylaw, partial nudity includes less than completely covered or opaquely covered areas of the human breast, genitals, or buttocks.
So I think that'll be
Policy will stand on its own.
So then, this city clerk, would you add at the back of the adult entertainment as defined in the land use bylaw?
I'm sorry.
Like on this, where it says be of adult entertainment, would you put it as defined in the land use bylaw, or would you just leave it?
I'd have to do a little more research, but I don't believe that you can have adult entertainment without a permit. Without a permit, you have to go to the land use bylaw. So I'd have to go through that piece. So within the land use bylaw, I think you need a permit to hold that type of entertainment.
So rules has to be followed if we can get to here.
But notwithstanding that, you could say, I think what the city manager said, be of adult entertainment as defined by city bylaw 10XYZ.
And we could say as defined by the city land use bylaws.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is about sponsorship and advertising, and not the actual provision of adult entertainment.
It's just simply the advertising portion that would go with potential business.
So I just wasn't sure that the land use bylaw was relevant. The definition certainly is, but citing it in the land use bylaw might not be relevant. We just add it right into this document.
As a definition.
Can we just recommend that we put that definition into this policy? And through the manager.
And it stands on its own, no need.
And you're not referencing a land use bylaw or blah, 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 whatever, you have to go back and redo it again later, you know, general just said land use bylaw, you don't want to put any numbers in there either, because then you have to read the policy of land use bylaw changes.
So simple definition addition. Okay. Any further discussion to that? We'll have a discussion. All right. Councilor White, one more call, anything from your end? Good there? All right. I'll look then for council's direction. Amendment 7.4.4, sponsorship of
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that council approve the sponsorship and advertising policy number 130-01 as amended.
Thank you. Seconded? Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the question? Not seeing any, call for the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Joel. I would ask for a motion to take a short recess. So moved. Thank you. Seconded? All in favor? Opposed? apologize to those that are joining us live stream. If you haven't been hearing us, we'll encourage everybody to turn on the mic and we're going to just do another mic check from that perspective. But I understand there was some challenges on the live stream. People who are joining us today are not hearing us. So please just ensure when you speak that the mic light is on. We'll have our team check that as we go on. So moving on to agenda item number 7.5, 7.5.1, city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 7.5.1, transfer of 2019 outstanding stormwater utility charges to 21 taxes. I'll ask Karen Delarosa to come forward and present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council.
Good afternoon, Karen.
Before you today is the request for decision on the transfer of 2019 outstanding stormwater utility charges to 2021 taxes, with a recommendation that Council approve the transfer of the 2019 outstanding stormwater utility amounts listed in Table 1-2019 outstanding stormwater utility charges to the 2021 tax roll of the property owner. Administration advised during the March 15, 2021 Verbal Minutes and Priorities Committee meeting that there are several outstanding stormwater utility customer accounts in arrears, and that the transfer of this outstanding amounts to charge, and that the transferring the outstanding stormwater utility charges to the 2021 tax roll of the property owner is intended to recover $47,027.28 in arrears. At this time, we have a total of 40 properties from 25 stormwater utility customer accounts that have outstanding amounts owed to the city of Lloydminster. Notification letters were mailed to the property owners on February 21st of 2020 and again on January 25th of 2021, informing them that administration has begun the process to transfer the outstanding 2019 stormwater utility charges to the 2021 tax roll. If the outstanding amounts is not paid by March 31st, 2021. Also, Your Worship had asked in the GPC meeting about the 2020 transfer. For 2020, we had transferred $20,561.31 in arrears from 25 properties and 24 accounts.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Questions? Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. To that question, how were those doing now, the ones that we transferred a year ago? Do we have the majority of those collected, or the majority of those standing out in specifics, just majority or not?
I would have to check on that, Councilor Buckingham. I don't have that information as of this time.
I was just wondering what our backlog in these things were, as I had a very wonderful conversation with someone here the other day about their specific stormwater utility bill, and having agricultural lands within the city, and was obviously not pleased with the amount of the stormwater utility that they were being levied. So the next question I had revolved around that is, and I'm sure we have the thought process, or what we've done to make it as fair and equitable as possible across all land types and owners in the city, because there's obviously a varying degree of that.
Yes, so to ensure that we have an equitable utility, we have two different rates for stormwater utility charges. So we have a rate for a property that is fully developed that is contributing more to the stormwater system than a property that is vacant. So for an agricultural land, they're only being charged 25% of the typical stormwater utility levy.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm thinking that I was talking to someone that was on the $5,700 range. They were quite concerned about it, so I just wanted to have it publicly stated that not every property, everything is the same rate. It's all been looked at, it's all been adjusted. It's not that the city just coming in and saying everybody in the city is this. It's different.
It's a different rate based on the development intensity and also based on the property size.
And just the last question I have, before we transfer it to taxes, do we have any other collections ability? Because taxes is very much a final, once it's on your tax roll, it's not going away. Mm-hmm. Do we have any other ability, if we don't transfer it to taxes, stand on at that, or leg to stand on at that point?
So before we transfer the taxes, like what we are transferring right now is 2019 outstanding stormwater utility charges. So we give property owners over a year to settle their outstanding amounts. We had sent out notification back in February that we will begin the process, just to let them know and remind them about the payment. However, this is, I guess, our last resort in terms of recovering their balances, so it's a transfer to taxes.
From the letters of notification that went out, was this list longer before that notification went out to people, or do we have 10% of people pay up at that point? Or?
That's correct. The list is longer, also so there have been some property owners that have paid restitution letters with them.
Okay, because I'm guessing some of these, this will be the same year over year as far as whose property it is and so on and so forth. So, okay, that's, we have no leg to stand on unless we transfer this to taxes, is I guess the question I have.
In terms of recovering the
right.
notes, except for sending it up to collections.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, just generally, it's really important that we do continue down the process. If we're acknowledging through our levy that we charge in the first place that it's important for everyone to pay a fair share in terms of the overall infrastructure to get the replacements done that we need, specifically the stormwater, we have to recover it at some point, and if we don't take a hard stand and push it towards taxes, then essentially it means that that amount's not a levy, and that it was never really a fee in the first place, and we just roll over and write it off and say, no big deal, pay the bond, whatever the case is. There is some finality to this, because ultimately when these properties sell, especially these $60 ones that are vacant lots, when these properties ultimately sell, once the house is built on it, the city will recover their $60 year over year, or when they get caught up on taxes. So, yeah, I think it's a good thing to do. I think there's some subjectivity with some of the different property types, and it's a conversation we could have for another day, but for what the policy is and what the fees are as of right now, I think it's important that we carry through and continue, because there are some agricultural properties that would have paid their fees, and others that may have not. So we want to make sure that we treat them all fairly as per the fees that exist right now.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the things we can consider, we will be bringing the stormwater bylaw and fees forward to council in the future. We can look at that bylaw and how council would like to consider those different types of properties. We feel we've allocated them properly, and there is a significant discount for undeveloped agricultural land, but they are the largest in our municipality as well. So they're 160 acres versus 0.5 of an acre or 0.2 of an acre. So we can definitely look at that as we bring the bylaw back for review later on this year.
Thank you, Executive Minister. Councilor.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I think the other part is that I really think it's important that as council and the city recognize the importance of this particular tax levy, or whatever you want to call it. Here we are with storms that are once in 50 years that are occurring, I think a couple of years in a row, and the damage that it's done to our city and individual people's property is pretty significant. And there have been some articles, I think, that have come through our email system when we're speaking directly to this. So I think we need to make sure, as we look at people pushing back on it, the amounts and the concerns they have, that it's pretty clear that, a couple of things. One is there are issues around how we manage, the runoff. Secondarily, this was put in place so that every single property owner, and not those that are waived from paying taxes on the property, but everybody who has title pays into this utility fund because everybody's part of the city needs to be addressing the concern around these storms and the water that's running off and potential damage. So we need to be steadfast, I think, in pursuing these goals. and we'll continue to be challenged around amounts, but then we keep working at that piece. But I just want to say, I think this is the right path to go. Other cities are facing, you know, like the city of Edmonton is looking at, I don't know, $500 million in terms of infrastructure needs. And a big part of it is, again, is mitigating the risk of floodwaters that come from these rains that are supposed to only happen once every 50, once every 100 years. That's not happening. Predictions are out the window, and we're seeing more of these. So there's a lot of value in this and importance for us to be able to do what we need to do for the residents of our city.
Any other comments? Councilor Reddy, you're good, thank you. With that, I will look for direction from council on 7.5.1. Councilor Torres.
Move that council approve the transfer of the 2019 outstanding stormwater utility amounts listed in table 1, 2019 outstanding stormwater utility charges to the 2021 tax roll of the property owner.
Thank you. Seconder, Councilor Pacheco. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. And have a great day. Moving on to City Manager on 7.5.2.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 7.5.2, Geotechnical Services Standing Offer Agreement Extension 2021. I'll ask James Rogers to come forward.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Good afternoon, James.
Before you is the Geotechnical Services Standing Offer Agreement Extension 2021. The recommendation is that Council approve the extension of the Geotechnical Services Standing Offer Agreement with Solid Earth Geotechnical Incorporated of Lloydminster, Alberta for 1 year between March 2021 and March 2022, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. At the February 11th, 2019 regular council meeting, council approved the award of the Geotechnical Services Standing Offer Agreement to Solid Earth for a term of 1 year with an option to extend the agreement for 2 additional years. Administration is looking to exercise the option to extend the agreement for the 3rd and final year between March 2021 and March 2022. The City of Lloydminster capital projects require geotechnical materials testing services to assist with successful project delivery. Material testing is a necessary part of the construction process for quality assurance and ensuring the materials used will lead to structures that meet their design needs. As the exact quantity and cost of services are not known, the final cost is dependent on the number of projects where these services are required, the subsurface conditions of the sites, construction issues, and various other factors. The costs incurred under this agreement will be applied to the capital infrastructure project for which they were rendered. The scope of work for this agreement includes completing all materials testing, including soils, aggregates, concrete, and asphalt, and having a geotechnical engineer available for consultation throughout the design and construction process on all capital infrastructure projects. The geotechnical engineer would work with the project manager to establish solutions to construction problems associated with the materials, as well as review test results to ensure contractor compliance with the city's specifications. As mentioned, the costs incurred under this agreement will be applied to the capital infrastructure project for which the services were rendered. The exact quantity of work is not known, as the work is heavily dependent on the subsurface conditions of soils, construction issues, projects where geotechnical engineering services are required, and other various factors. Each project will have a portion of its budget set aside for geotechnical engineering work expected. It is anticipated that the total cost of work or services provided by Solid Earth in 2021 will be between $350,000 and $450,000. This fee is heavily dependent on the level of services provided and the number of capital projects requiring geotechnical services. With that, I'll turn it over to Mayor and Council for any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you, James. Questions or comments? Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just generally, would the 350 to 450 be the same kind of ballpark as prior years, or is there just different nature of project where it would be a higher or lower number this year?
Great question, Councillor Thorson. So this would be, we're anticipating this year to be a higher dollar value with the agreement, knowing that we have the wastewater treatment facility, we have the fire station, and we have a few other larger building capital projects where their services will also be required. We have the concrete intersection at 44th and 62, as well as the 44th Street rehabilitation, which are large projects and very heavily materials related. So this would be a higher year than we typically see with them.
Yes. So the scope of their agreement, is it the same for all types of materials tested, or do you have various pricing based on, you know, because we're talking about concrete intersection as one, so is there concrete pricing that would be different from normal scope, or it's just all in one pricing?
So we would have different prices for the different materials, different price for testing asphalt because the tests are different, the sampling requirements are different, aggregates, density tests when we're compacting our trenches for water and sewer mains, as well as concrete testing. So they are individual rates per test provided.
And just the final question that I had is just their units, like their per unit cost, if they more or less a per unit test, is it, have the rates changed in this last year, or did the rates stay the same for all the years of the contract?
Great question. I believe we locked them in with the original agreement to their materials testing rates for the 3 years, and I can take a review of that and provide a comment on it.
At the end of the day, based on your, you know, assumption of how much it will cost and it to be part of the capital project, the individual, it won't really make a huge difference. It's just more on the than anything as to whether or not there's been a moving scale of these things in the last few years.
Great question.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just help me understand, because I wasn't here when this decision was made. So the cost could be about $350 in the year. And so typically when we're doing something like that, we would tender it out or put it out for bid. But this is already an agreement in place. So was that what happened originally, and now we're just extending it?
So before it's a great question, Councillor Mary. So before the standing offer agreement was awarded to Solid Earth, we would have a capital project, and I'm just going to pick a water sewer replacement program. So we would have to tender out for a design consultant to complete the detailed design and contract management. We would also have to tender out for these services, materials testing services, and then we would have to tender out for a construction contractor to build it. We found project efficiencies, cost savings by going to a standing offer agreement with one materials testing agency or consultant that would standardize all capital projects that we have, whether it was a street improvement, water, sewer, or a building project is in the fire station. So I hope that answers your question on what we did before.
Thank you, James. It helped me understand it a lot.
Yeah, thanks. So James, just a quick question. I guess I think I understand the role, and I guess the piece I'm thinking about is that we've had projects in the past that have come in that haven't met the final scope and specs, if you like. And so we have roads deteriorating and other things that have deteriorated in the past historically. This service will ensure that if things go south, they will find out A, quickly, and B, if they find out late, even then, we will still be able to pursue legal action for restitution and a better final product. Is that part of what they do?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for your question. So they fulfill a large piece of every project, and that is acting as a subject matter expert in aggregates for asphalt and testing those to make sure that they are within our specifications, which we've vetted out through other projects that will withstand traffic loading or other loading on whatever material that we are putting down. So they are bridging the gap between us as project managers. We have a good understanding of materials, but they really have a good understanding of what it takes to build these roads or compact clay or replace concrete. So they provide that backstop for us. And with them being on standing offer agreement, we can have those discussions that, oh, we see this parameter is out, what's your thoughts? And we can be more proactive than reactive on materials and the issues that can come up with poor materials.
So have we had examples of them acting on our behalf in that particular way as you're recommending now?
Yes. I have one going.
Yeah, just there. The material tester that we hire is basically our consultant to do our QA QC, QA QC. So if we talk about an asphalt project, for example, they would be doing the asphalt density test to make sure they're fitting within our parameters. The contractor is also doing some of their own quality assurance to ensure that parameters come into place. When those densities come back, they're reviewed. If they're not into parameters, we use that to go back to the contractor to either get that remediated or discount the cost or hold money back for the deficiencies. So they're our consultant to ensure that the qualities we're specifying within a project are being met and adhered to. So they get used in your parameter that you talked about, every project. So every project we're doing that. Now, have they come back to help us in a case? I can't think of any off the top of my head where we were going into litigation, if that's where you were going with that. But if we were to, they would definitely be one of the first ones we would call upon to do that review and provide information around the QA/QC. Back to Councillor Maron's question, when we put this out 3 years ago, it was publicly tendered and every organization that could deliver that service had opportunity to bid on it. And a part of that agreement and RFP was a proposed 3-year service agreement, which is what we're executing the 3rd year. I hope that answers that a little bit.
Thank you, it answers it. I guess in my other life, I thought that one of the challenges was redoing portions of a facility or whatever it was that they had done. And in the end, we're trying to always negotiate, we'll give you a discount on the next piece, and then often you were never clear on whether or not you were shortchanging the life of any part of the facility or whatever. And it's difficult to be able to estimate what you're really losing. It's really quick for some of these individuals to tell you what you're going to save in the next portion, but they weren't as accurate about what you're losing. So perhaps the road was going to last 5 years less. So big deal, but the cost of that road 15 years down the road might be 10 times as much as it is now. So it's trying to make sure that we're able to make sure we look after our interests as best we can.
We're a little more black and white, where you either meet our spec or you don't. And if you don't meet our spec, there's repercussions to not meeting that spec, which is potentially removal.
Yeah.
Or I don't think we've ever done this, but I think an option would be we could acknowledge that it's not meeting spec and take a discount on the price. I don't think we've ever done that. We've always gone back and had the consultant remove or the contractor remove and replace. Same with compaction testing. You're either meeting or you're not. If you're not, you need to put more effort into that compaction of that trench in order to meet our standard. Once you meet our standard, then you can move on to your next portion of the project. So they're there all the way along the process to ensure our standards are being adhered to, and that essentially contractors are doing what they are bid to do or what they bid to complete for work.
Yeah, I guess I think, if I'm having a legal case, I want to hire a good lawyer. In this case, I want to hire a good geotech guy, right? To avoid having to hire a lawyer.
100%. I agree with that analogy, and this is probably, we've worked with Solid Earth for a long time, and they're one of the best in the business.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of going as far as, obviously you must be happy if you're trying to extend that. And secondly, they have a local presence here in town, is that correct?
Absolutely. So for your first comment, are we happy with Solid Earth and their firm and the people that they have? Absolutely. They have helped our project management team in engineering services, as well as a lot of other departments within the city that use their services, drastically improve our project quality, project turnaround, and everything that comes along with projects and the materials that go into them. So we are extremely happy with their services.
And I guess that's an advantage having them locally. It's
yes,
more efficient, and you're not having to wait for testing being done out of town or whatever, it's, you have easy access to them, so.
So everybody that we do work with, they are local. They live within Lloydminster or the surrounding area. If they do need to bring in other support to help them, they do have offices in Honeyville, Cold Lake, and Edmonton. They do provide support to it, but predominantly everybody out that firm, I believe, is local, which is fantastic.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, Councilor Torson. Thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah, one of the other things I wanted to add is just, as we were talking about what they really do, is just the prelim stuff as well. So doing the soil testing before you even start a project, to make sure you're even using the right materials based on the quality of the soil. That's a pretty huge part of that too. So before you even do design, you have to know what you're working with as far as what's it sitting on. And with a city that is built more or less on slough land, it's pretty important to know and understand. And that's another reason why I think it's good to have an MSA in place, is because you don't necessarily know how many tests you're going to have to do with an area before you get started on a project. You may find out that you need more tests in an area than you realize, so having an MSA means you can move that around a little bit and say, yeah, you know, this soil needs more testing than others do just based on the nature of what's in it. So having an MSA gives us that ability to kind of work projects better.
Exactly.
Any other questions from this table? I'll look to Councilor White. You're good? Thank you very much. There's no further questions. I'll look for direction from Council on 7.5.2, the geotechnical service standing agreement extension 2021.
Thank you, Worship. I move the Council approve the extension of the geotechnical services standing offer agreement with the Solar Geotechnical Inc. of Lloydminster, Alberta for 1 year between March 2021 and March 2022, with the mayor and the city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents.
Thank you. Second. Mr. Bratchett, thank you very much. Any further discussion on the question at hand? Not seeing any, I'll call for it. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you.
Moving on to 7.5.3, the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 7.5.3, project update for the mechanical wastewater treatment facility, I'll ask Terry Burke to come forward and present.
Afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon, Terry.
So just to provide an update on the project, since the approval of the validation report back in August 17th of 2020, the IPD team was hard at work finalizing that design and preparing for our next phases, so construction and then ultimately commissioning and then operation from there. The collaborative design process has been greatly appreciated from my perspective in seeing what happens within this project. And as the report says, we're finding a lot of efficiencies as we dive deeper into it. That collaborative process of including everybody from the designers to the constructors, and then even into some of the actual workers in some cases too, has been greatly appreciated and found some efficiencies as part of it. The biggest part of this project, in consideration of the design, is of course a process system, which is a really fairly major part of the piece. And that's taken some time, and the team is working through those key, that key design and coming up and meeting the objectives of the construction team, which was slated to start this spring, and I'll provide a little update on that one too as well. On the construction side of things, some site work was completed last fall in 2020 with the removal of the sludge pile and the relocation of shallow utilities, and that were in the way of the proposed facility. Construction is scheduled to start actually the first week in April 2021. We've actually started working already, moving some materials for the laydown yard for site trailers and that kind of stuff like that, and starting digging out the actual bioreactor tanks, so taking down those things already. So we're a little bit ahead of schedule on that piece, but the main construction, site trailers, everything else is still slated for that first part of April to be out there. Work is happening as we speak. I just want to acknowledge on the construction side of things, we've been working with SWASA, the Saskatchewan Water Security Agency, and have obtained a permit to construct, a temporary permit to construct at this point in time. They've helped us out greatly and listened to us as part of this IPD.
process. It is very new to them, just as it is us, but they work with us, listen to us, understand the uniquenesses of it, and as such, we've got this temporary permit to construct without them having the final design in place. They have enough confidence in what we've given them to date that they're giving us this I guess, go ahead. We've also got our local building permit to do the foundation type stuff as well, so as soon as we get going, we have the concrete flowing sooner or later, for sure. On the budget and scheduling, moving on the project estimate and budget that's occurred, the team has tendered out a few pieces, such as site work, concrete supply, and the pre-engineered building. To date, and for the most part, the pricing has been within the estimate of the validation reports at 81.5. There's been the odd tender where prices are higher, but these are for more items or work that was not included in the validation that we found through the detailed design that were needed to be added. So again, within reason, by all means. One thing to note, there has been some cautionary messages from industry and vendors with regard to increases in material costs. And we are keeping an eye on those ones because they obviously they're concerning for us. But we also have money in our risk register to deal with those things as well too. So I think there's about $3 to $4 million in our risk register as part of the validation report. So we do have some contingency to deal with those scenarios for sure and such. Where am I here? Sorry. As the design is processed, there have been efficiencies that have come forward, such as the reduction in the amount of concrete required for the bioreactors. So based on the validation, there was an understanding the bioreactor would be a certain size, and when the detailed design is completed, it has been completed as part of that. There's almost $500,000 worth of savings just in concrete for what we came up on that detailed design. So things like that, there's going to be more of that for sure. But as we know the details, those things have been ironed out. So it's definitely reassuring that we're seeing momentum in that direction for sure. In regards to schedule, the team continues to look at the project from where it is today, and ultimately to when the plant is turned over to us in 2023. And this is taken into consideration as I talk about the construction, commissioning, operation type stuff like there. Just that commissioning part of it is a complex one. How we transition from our current lagoon-based system into a working membrane bioreactor. And it's going to take some steps, and working with SWASA is going to be key to those understandings as well. Another note that all the funding agreements are in place. One of the agreements, the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, the city was required to complete and submit the greenhouse gas and climate lens assessments. These documents are now complete and have been submitted. In summary, both reports indicate no concerns as the facility that is being built, designed to build. So there's no concerns as far as elevated greenhouse gases against a comparable facility or anything like that. So. On the procurement side of things, I want to highlight a couple key areas just to inform council and then go through the actual tendering process. So there's within the CCD's 230 agreement, there's the possibility that these main partners can self-perform work. And the partners being ISL as our engineering consultant, Chandos Bird being our general contractor, Suez as being our technology vendor, sorry, I'm abbreviating there a little bit on the names, but Magna as being our electrical controls and system integration teams. They all have the ability to self-perform work, and in general, it means within their expertise or with what they're providing as part of the original onboarding that we had and the tendering process that we did, bringing them on board earlier last year and such. And for the example, I used Suez in part of the design or initial work. The IBD team chose a membrane bioreactor as a technology vendor. They have that in their wheelhouse, and we'll be procuring those components and auxiliary components that make up that membrane bioreactor through Suez. So that's self-performed. Chandos Bird would be another key one. Their role as the GC, they're leading that general construction of that whole facility. And they will be bringing forward self-performing work components. They have already been bringing forward components of that to self-perform. But it's not only them doing the work, they also have opportunities for tendering sub-parts of those components as well. They may be able to do all of it 100% within their own wheelhouse, but there's also opportunity for other tenders or other vendors and trades within the community region, whatever it happens to be, to submit for bids on those kind of key pieces. And I kind of throw that one back as being on the Shannon Bird side of things, like the concrete, supply of concrete. That, you know, that went out for bid, was evaluated, and then two local companies definitely brought forward bids and moving forward from that. So that's within Shannon general contractor side of things, but subcontracted to the local concrete from there. Sorry, I got some more chairs. I want to make sure I talk about it. On the tendering side of things, basically I want to follow up with exactly what we're utilizing on the project as part of our tendering process. So we start off with the project implementation team. One of many, I can't remember how many we have, but we've got quite a few kits, as we call it. And they divide a need for a good or service that needs to be support the actual project. They work with the procurement pit, which is comprised of Mika from our legislative services team and a couple other representatives on the project as well. So they determine what's the best approach in actually tendering out that need. The tender documents are then posted on the city's bids and tenders site. Questions are forwarded to the actual pit, if we get any, and answered back to all parties. Once closed, all bids are sent to the respective pit that requested the tender and evaluated thereof. The pit then completes a set of approval, request for approval, which is evaluated and reviewed by the project management team, or PMT, which I am a part of on the supply and representing the city. So. Also, we are general information on the wastewater treatment facility can be found on our website, so Lloydminster.ca, there's City Hall wastewater treatment facility. We've got some general information on IPD, general information on the project itself, as well as we've got a procurement area where we talk about this process, and we'll outline approvals or tendered packages as we move forward in this project. Yeah, I'll turn it back to council and your worship for questions or comments.
Thank you, Terry.
Your worship. Yeah, just before we go too far, so I just want to bring us back to the validation report. So when the validation report was issued to City Council or brought forward to City Council for approval, the validation cost was $81.5 million, and that was put forth by the IPD project team. When Terry talks about some of the efficiencies that have been seen, when that validation report came forward to council, their estimate, the estimated cost of the project was still in excess of $2.5 million. So they validated and provided a guarantee $81.5 million to council in the validation report. So some of these efficiencies Terry's talking about, i.e. the concrete savings on the bioreactor tanks, are going towards the savings of the project team to get it below validation cost. And then once design is done, there'll be another value, project value that'll be evaluated that the project team will be held accountable for from there. So I just wanted, I know there's talk about cost reduction. It's not going to be a reduction necessarily at this point on the $81.5 million. So I just wanted to provide some clarity on that. It's project efficiency is what that is.
Right now we're in the profit margin right now. As we brought forward the validation report, we talked about that being they're in the profit, danger of their profits, losing their profit for that portion.
Thank you. Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the thing that gets really tricky, and I don't know if it's dicey, it's a good thing that our IPD team does have the ability to do some of the self-work, because for cost savings, we will be sharing that if the overall cost comes in lower than the 81 million we've been guaranteed. So that will get split up by the partners, and that's great for the city. That means less long-term debt we have to take on.
Yeah, that's a 50% to the city, and then the other 50% split between all the other holders. Yeah.
But then there still becomes a question depending on percentage of ownership, and I doubt that any of them on this building scheme anything to begin with. But then if you're doing your own self-work, are you doing it at cost, or are you doing it at full bill-out rate? And would you have to have comparable bill-out rate of someone else that you potentially tendered to, and you could say, yeah, I could do it for that price or less? Because you would still be making that revenue going back to your team, like to your own business, if it's doing the self-work. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do. It's evaluate. You want to take it? Okay.
When they perform self-work, if it's within their work themselves, it's as per the agreement, so it is at cost with their profit expectations on top of that. If it's tendered out in sub-consultants, that's where you get into where profit is included into that portion only. Like that tender has its own profit inclinations.
Oh, okay.
But it's compared back to the validation report cost they put towards that allocation of work. So let's just say forming of the bioreactors, if they're self-performing that, there would have been cost that they would have had to have put forward as part of the validation report, that guarantee cost. When they're now going to the IPD team and saying we're self-performing this, they have to show that cost and compare it back to the validation report to ensure it's value for project, and that team makes the decision on how to best move forward with that. Now, if that cost comes over what they had indicated in the validation report, then I think the project team, PMT, looks at other methods of procuring that service. But their competitive was bid through the GC. When we acquired the GC, their rates and their markup and profit was all procured as part of that process.
Yeah, just to add to that, just to make sure you're reinforcing that. Even self-perform work still comes to the PMT for approval, and as such, that's like you said, it's reviewed against the actual validation report cost estimate and any verification there, whether you're under budget or not, and asking those critical questions before approval.
Nothing really happens on the project without all PMT members being involved in a decision making. So we don't have one PMT member, i.e. the GC, making decisions on the project without the rest of PMT, which includes Terry as our PMT member for the city, and several others from all the other parties that are a part of the IPD, all four others. So it's a pretty transparent process within that, what I call the big room, around making those decisions best for project. That's probably our motto or our theme is everything we do is best for project, because at the end of the day, that comes back to our benefit at 50% and their benefit at 50% allocated out to each of the parties. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, just to clarify, as soon as I was reminded that we already know everyone's cost and they've already told us everyone the profit that they would be getting on it, because this whole IPD process really relies on trust with partners to say, hey, we're opening up all our books, you guys are going to know how much overhead is put into our business in general, and everybody on that team has to do that to be part of the team. So we already know all that stuff, so we know no individual part of the project team could take advantage of the project to their own benefit.
100% on that one. And that those rates that you talk about, those are audited as well. So there's a separate auditor that goes through the whole process of evaluating each partner, make sure that what they brought forward, those base costs and overhead were aligned with those key principles. But each partner also had their own expectations of profit and brought forward and was accepted based on that as well.
Councilor Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Terry, and your team for putting this together. There was a lot of information in there. And I'm not going to lie, I had to read it a couple of times and I still didn't understand it. So just the area of concern for me was that self-perform area. And I think perhaps I'm feeling more confident now around the transparency and the costs associated with it. I just came into it thinking that any of that work would be put up for tender. And so now I think I understand it a little bit better. So thanks for clarifying those pieces. I don't have any further questions.
And just to make sure, it said there's still opportunities that will be coming out for tender. It's just like I said, those partners definitely have a key role, and they were hired as that, and they may be performing work. But even if they are performing the work, I do believe there's still other tendering opportunities that come out of that as well. But overall, like I said, we use Sandals Bird. They're going to oversee all the construction of the facility. So whatever subcontracts come out, it's coming through Sandals.
One example we talk about in the project is electrical. Magna 4 is our electrical consultant. They could self-perform doing all the wiring for the entire project. They more than likely, I don't know if the decision's been made, but they will more than likely put a tender out to hire a electrical firm to run the conduits and run the cables. And then they would do the technical, high complexity of all the connections as part of that self-perform. So that's kind of how the project works and how we are able to get the price in where it needs to be.
Thanks, Richard. So a lot of trust in you, Terry, and Don going forward with this project, but I guess the two questions that come to mind is that, well, are any surprises for you in this? And are there any surprises for companies that haven't gone through this model and process before?
A lot of education, I guess, and all around, like for the second question, part of your question.
Yes.
Yeah,
Your perspective.
Really doing a lot of research on it and understanding what it means to be part of an IPD project and that collaborative and being tied in that contract. It's a hard thing for some companies to realize, but from my perspective, it's actually a good thing based on the size of the project. I do believe, again, we've designed, well, not quite completely designed, but in all reality, it's taken us just over a year to create something, like do a validation of pre-design, get it into detail design, and we're starting the construction. So it's helped having that collaborative nature. So, but understanding those key principles of what IBD is, I think it's like for the outside people for sure, or outside contractors, consultants, whatever it happens to be. From my perspective, it's time. Like from administration or being on the city side of things, the amount of time that we have to put into the project is more than any other procurement or project method that we've ever utilized. But that's there for a reason too, because we're part of that decision-making process. We're part of that design, that decision-making process, part of design, and being involved in that commissioning and everything else. That's why it's so elevated, and in all reality, it's a great benefit.
Okay. So
yeah, I just want to add to that. Like, I'll get on a soapbox maybe a little bit. I don't know. I like talking about this stuff because it gets me excited.
10 seconds.
Yeah, no, you're not getting 10 seconds. So actually, I was going to say we just had a SMT meeting here last week, and SMT is myself and the other leads from each of those GCs, and we talked exactly about what you just asked. There's a couple things that I think really surprised all of us through that process. Number one, being a municipality and dealing with public funds has been an interesting way of nobody really understand what the impact was going to be being a municipal. So they're used to doing IPD through private. Interlocking that into municipal public funding was a challenge in the contract, the CCD C30 contract, as well as some of these issues that come up through the process, i.e. what are your rates, i.e. what does the audit say, and how do we ensure we're covering our municipal taxpayers' perspective and ensuring our taxpayer dollars are being spent properly and adequately. The other side of that was around profit, and I think the GC really didn't fully, I don't know how to articulate this, but I didn't think they fully articulated maybe some of the challenges they've seen working for a municipal owner, and that ultimately is to our benefit. And I don't want to right out say it, but it's to our benefit. I think if they were to do that again, their approach would be somewhat a little bit different in dealing with a municipality, because there are challenges and there are things you need to deal with that are different than doing an IPD with a private school or a private hospital or something like that. So I told the councillor, I can't remember which councillor it was, about a week ago too, like if we would have went regular design bid build, we'd be still designing, and we might be designing till next year. We would have started construction. We would have had the design ran through because we have a deadline. We would have hired a GC. We would have had a change order on day one because the consultant didn't design something properly that couldn't be constructed. We'd be in the 90+ million easily to deliver this same project. I firmly believe the IPD has proven to show efficiencies, and when I brought that up with the SMT, they all kind of concurred, yes, we've seen significant cost savings by going this approach. So I think the method has huge validity in municipal governance and how we deliver municipal projects. Yes, there's some learnings, and yes, we plan to tell the world about our learnings as we move through the project, but it didn't come without its challenges. And I gotta thank Terry and the rest of the PMT and the SMT that helped us get through these challenges, and I think we're gonna have a pretty good product at the end of the day for a price that is very competitive.
So have the trainers, have to come back quite often to make sure everybody stays on track?
Yeah, we've got our one trainer that we meet actually every week on, just to make sure we're still in that collaborative mode and still looking at those end goals and still doing. I'm not too sure if we actually communicate this to council, but part of that schedule is you set milestones throughout this. So maybe it's completion of the digging of the bioreactors, whatever it has to be. That's a milestone, right? But from that milestone, we do what we call pull plan. From that, to get that part, what needs to be done to get to that set in stone milestone. And that could involve one party, or that could involve 100 parties. And each one of those parties have to put down on time and schedule, I need to do this before it goes to this step. Da, 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 da. And you do that for each step, every 6 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it happens to be. You're doing that all continuously. And again, it's not part of that collaboration. Again, putting that responsibility back on the people. I need something from you or wherever else, right? And that expectation is put onto you. And
your accountability is, I need to get this done too, right? So, yeah.
Any other questions around the table about IPD? Councillor Whiting. You're good?
Just another couple things. I think I've included.
Oh, certainly. Go ahead, Terry.
A couple of pictures too. I think they were.
Yep, there were some pictures. So,
so just a little couple of things to roll over, I guess, as far as from the model that we have. This is the model itself is live and being added to as we make decisions. In all reality, this piece needs to go here. This piece needs to go there. So this is as it sits today, and you can see the orange or the not so good looking side of things being the old part of the facility, and then the new side to the left hand side of the page.
So Terry, knowing the existing facility, we're cutting down the dirt in front of that, and we'll the existing wastewater treatment plant, and we should alleviate some of the running water through the plant doors.
Yeah, that's one of the key things that we looked at when placing the elevation of the new building. The new building is actually higher than the old building.
Okay.
So starting off with good positive drainage from that side of things.
Yeah.
There's still, like where the vehicles are, there's still some concerns there that are being ironed out, but we do have I do believe we have a solution for that.
Okay, good.
And because there's other mitigating factors that really play into that one. But it's stuff like that for sure that are being addressed as well.
Good.
Next slide. So this is just a little shot of the admin area, so administrative area. So that first part of that building where you've seen the vehicles parked against. So some offices on the right-hand side with a lunch area and a meeting type space out in the open air. There will be use of that projector that we have in the big room will come into this area and screen everything else. Next one. This one shows more of the process area. So the key, so as it goes through, this is the last part of the process system. Where the hand is right now is our chemical storage room. So towards the bottom left-hand side of the page. With the other areas between the administration building and the process area being for the lab, the control room, washrooms, and shower facilities, and the electrical room towards the top. Next one, I think. Yeah, so there's a little more detailed shot of the actual process area. So you can see the blowers at the very back of the room to support the whole process of the things, the system, and then the pumps accordingly on that'll be the westerly wall. And you can see the detail that's
that's in that model. And again, as all designs get finalized, they're put into this. Again, checking for that any interference aspects of things. And I know even as we say, there's still being a readjustment of some of these components. Just thinking about more efficiencies or easier to construct or operate as well too. So I think that's it, isn't there? Is there one more?
No, I think that's the last one.
Okay. So that's a little snapshot of the facility, just to give everybody a look-see. But yeah, awesome.
Well, Terry, thank you very much. I think we're all excited about this, if anybody more than myself and Don, because it's great to see us moving forward, building a facility that's going to be state-of-the-art, that's going to serve our community for at least 20 years.
Oh, easily.
And, you know, it's going to be certainly a showcase piece, because I think the provincial governments of Saskatchewan and Alberta have expressed interest seeing how this goes. And there'll be others, I'm sure, municipalities from far and wide that will want to know if they can save money. And I think that the whole collaborative approach, as you've talked about, and the process that goes through is just really very impressive, because if anyone's ever been involved in oil and gas or any other construction project, and I think Councillor Baker, who's not here, but how many times there was fights between the general contractor, the architect, the engineer, and then the poor user who had to pay for the damn thing. And same in oil and gas. I've seen it many times that it was built, and then the process or the operations people took over from the engineering department and said, we're throwing all that stuff out because that's not what we use every day. And it just, I'm looking forward to it. I know Lanny's excited from the wastewater treatment plant and the team there, Karen and the crew and yourself. And it's just great to see so much involvement from our team, because they're going to be very proud of that facility. They're going to work in it. They're going to maintain it. And I will say this, if you haven't had the chance to see the wastewater treatment plant that we have currently today, it's one of the cleanest facilities we have in the city. We're all very clean, but the pride that goes on at the wastewater treatment plant to ensure that they do the best job that they can dealing with the worst of situations, it's muchly appreciated. So all the best to you and the crew, but I think you need a motion just to simply receive this for a report.
For
so
information, yeah.
There's Councillor Buckingham.
Yeah, I think we'll charge admission out there for all the thrilled or tons of people that are going to come and want to see this at the end of the day there to see how we did it. So try and offset some of the costs of operating, I think. I move that council accept this report as information.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconded, Councillor Thorson. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion at hand? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks very much, Terry. Keep up the good work, and we'll look forward to seeing the groundbreaking here, hopefully in another month or so.
Yeah, you betcha. Oh, yeah, that was another thing I should have asked or mentioned too. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. We'll be circling back on that one. So, moving on to item number 8, bylaws. City Manager.
Thank you, Worship. For 8.1, bylaw number 2-2021, amendment to the land use bylaw number 5-2016, respecting development permits, I'll ask Caitlin Luster to come forward and present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of Council.
Good afternoon, Caitlin.
The recommendation is that Council grant second reading as well as third reading to bylaw number 02-2021, being a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw number 5-2016, respecting development permits, specifically discretionary use applications. The purpose of bylaw number 02-2021 is to adjust the process and considerations used to render a decision on discretionary use applications, as the current land use bylaw does not. At the December 7th Governance and Priorities Committee meeting, administration presented a report regarding adding discretionary uses to several land use districts. This brought forth questions related to discretionary use applications, especially with respect to the process and evaluation considerations. In response, administration completed a review of the permitting process for discretionary use applications and prepared an amendment to the land use bylaw that aligns with the best practices of comparable municipalities. Saskatchewan municipalities are required to include in their zoning bylaws the procedures for approval of discretionary use applications and the criteria used when rendering a decision. Albertan municipalities are not required to do the same under the Municipal Government Act. However, several of the municipalities' land use bylaws reviewed do cover discretionary uses in more detail. The practice of including procedures as well as general evaluation considerations for reviewing discretionary use applications will increase clarity and transparency for the public and developers, as well as solidify administration's processes as guided by the principles within the land use bylaw. The evaluation considerations topics include topics such as compliance with statutory plans, availability of more appropriate land, serviceability, impacts to the health, safety, convenience, or general welfare of persons in the area, adequate landscaping and screening, building sizes, shapes, and layouts reflect the character of the neighborhood, additional traffic generation, cumulative effects in the area, addresses the amenity needs of individuals utilizing the development, pedestrian safety and convenience, and complying with all other provincial and federal requirements. Additional proposed changes include adding to the list of required materials for development permit applications, adding a policy stating the development authority is to have regard for the evaluation considerations, extending the list of conditions that the development authority may prescribe to discretionary use applications. During the review that was completed, administration also developed a draft development permit process guide, which will form part of the city's municipal planning process document. Upon completion, the development permit process guide will be posted online to allow for all to reference for detailed information on the process. Bylaw number 02-2021 was advertised in the Meridian Source on March 4th and 11th, 2021. A public hearing was held during the regular council meeting on March 22nd, 2021. As part of the bylaw amendment process, referrals were sent to internal departments, external agencies, building and development community, real estate association, and members of the public with 21 days to comment. Internal comments were received stating that there were no comments on this application other than suggestions for rewording to increase clarity, while external agencies showed no concerns. One comment was received from the development community about the wording of proposed policy 2.12.3, which they found confusing. Administration followed up to determine the root cause of the confusion and provided context and information regarding this policy. To address the comments received, minor changes to the wording were completed, as can be seen in the revised draft bylaw number 02-2021. The most notable change was adding, in addition to any other submission requirements, applications for a development permit for discretionary use must be accompanied by a proposal outlining the applicant's justifications for the discretionary use to the end of proposed policy 2.13.1. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caitlin. Questions or comments? So everybody's studying this one. This planning, you folks challenge us at the council table, but that's all good. I guess that's what we need, is a little challenging once in a while. But Caitlin, if I can just walk you back to those last comments you talked about. So there was a comment received regarding 2.12.3, and that left that individual once the proposed changes you specified lastly. Did that solve their concern?
I believe so. They did not respond after I told them again what we were changing it to. I think that the confusion was more so understanding that the evaluation considerations, that phrase itself, is a title. So I think that was part of the confusion, and as well as just referring to the exact section that it is in the bylaw, which is pretty typical of the writing that bylaws do use.
Okay. If I can just walk you back even a little further. This is interesting that Saskatchewan actually has this more ingrained than Alberta, even though sometimes we often look and we see that it varies depending on the province. But yeah, because Saskatchewan is doing some more work at government relations again that will be coming to administration looking for some input. I was made aware of earlier today in a meeting. So yeah, it's interesting because planning is such a critical factor, and making sure that it's cut and clear, much clearer than in mud. So I think this will help that for many people in this community, and especially our developers and people that want to build things, that there's not that confusion in the gray area that will eliminate. Any other comments from council? Councilor Thorson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think it even just helps with the flow charts and stuff like that you've got in the attached document, because I think there's always, even my time on council, just getting discretionary use and direct control mixed up early and often, just assuming that some of the same rules apply to both of them all the time in terms of the approval process, and just clearing some of those things up. I think it's generally good, so thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Whiting.
No, I'm good. I really appreciate the information in there as far as reaching out to those external agencies and developers and that in town. And, you know, I rely on them being much smarter than me, and knowing that they don't have any big concerns. And what was concerned was just some wording confusion, but that's been cleared up. I'm very happy with this.
Thank you. One more call around the table. Not seeing any. A lot of heads going sideways, which is great. I will then look for direction from council on 8.1 regarding the bylaw number 02-2021, second and third readings. Councillor Thorson.
I move that council grant second reading to bylaw number 2-2021, being a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw number 5-2016 respecting discretionary use applications.
Councillor Marin, seconded. Thank you. Any further discussion on the question at hand? Not seeing any, I'll call for it. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Thorson, if you'd be so kind.
Yep. I move that council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 02-2021, being a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw number 5-2016 respecting discretionary use applications.
Thank you. Councillor Marin, seconded. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the third reading? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now, I realize you're back. If council would so indulge, we would move to 8.4. Caitlin is now present. It just makes for a little less, she doesn't have to leave clean and all those fine things. So if council would entertain that, we'll move to 8.4 at this time and come back to 8.2 momentarily. She's just going to get reloaded here with her paperwork. So we're moving down to 8.4, the bylaw number 09-2021, the amendment to the land use bylaw number 5-2016 respecting alcohol sales, direct control 5 district. Caitlin, please carry on.
Thank you. The recommendation is that council grant first reading to bylaw number 09-2021, being a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw number 5-2016 respecting alcohol sales in the direct control 5 district, and that council establish a public hearing to be held during the regular council meeting on April 12, 2021 at 2 p.m. In order to consider an application to allow for alcohol sales within the direct control 5, DC5 district, a text amendment to the land use bylaw number 5-2016 is required. The purpose of direct control districts is to provide for direct control over specific proposed development where it would otherwise not be permitted under more conventional districts. The purpose of the DC5 district is to accommodate the development of a commercial area intended to serve vehicular-oriented traffic on sites located abutting Highway 16 and to provide development that minimizes large vehicular internal traffic. The DC5 district was created specifically for the Hampton Square development in 2012 under the previously used zoning bylaw number 12-2001. The use defined in the current land use bylaw number 5-2016 as alcohol sales is not listed as either permitted or discretionary within this district. In the review of the DC5 district, and when this district was established, the sale of alcohol was permitted under retail store general. When the land use bylaw number 5-2016 came into force, it created the new use of alcohol sales separate from retail sales, as setbacks were established to provide separation to schools, etc. The proposed amendment originated from an applicant who wishes to operate a liquor store in the Hampton Square development. Examples of the uses existing in this development include restaurants, hotels, and cannabis sales minor. Currently, alcohol sales are a permitted use in the Central Commercial District, Highway Corridor Commercial District, and Commercial Shopping Center District. These commercial districts are similar to the DC5 district. Referrals have been circulated to internal departments, external agencies, and landowners within and adjacent to the Hampton Square development with 21 days to comment. Thank you. We can take questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. Questions or comments? I think this one's pretty straightforward. Land use change prior has also, it's one of those, you change one thing as we know around here and all of a sudden it changes the deck a little bit. So certainly appreciate it being brought forward. Councillor Whiting, any comments? You're good. I'll look to council for direction. Thank you, Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I move that council grant first reading the bylaw number 09-2021, amendment to the land use bylaw number 5-2016 respecting alcohol sales in the direct control 5 district, and the council establish a public hearing to be held during the regular council meeting on April 12, 2021 at 2 p.m.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Fagin. Any further discussion on the motion on hand? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Caitlin. We'll look forward to seeing you then. City Manager, we'll move on to 8.2, please.
Thank you, Worship. For 8.2, bylaw number 6-2021, tax penalty bylaw, I'll ask Scott Preddy to come forward and present.
Good afternoon again, Worship and Council.
Good afternoon again, Scott.
The recommendation is that Council grant second reading to bylaw number 6-2021 and that Council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 6-2021. Administration has identified the need to adjust internal process timelines for budget revisions and the mill rate bylaw. Currently, finance is completing year-end processes at the same time budget revisions are required for the mill rate bylaw. By adjusting the penalty dates from July 10th to July 25th and extending the mill rate bylaw approval dates to June, this will allow for more time between process deadlines. With the extension of the dates to further in the year, additional revisions will be accounted for in the mill rate bylaw, ensuring that mill rates are set with fewer changes to the assessment and tax levies later. Tax notice will be mailed out a few weeks later than previous years, but still gives taxpayers a little over 5 weeks to pay prior to the first penalty date this year. In future years, administration would aim to adjust the schedule to allow 6 weeks prior to the first penalty date. The bylaw requires tax notices to be mailed out 30 days before the first penalty date. Just to quickly go through the summary we have here in the table. Education rates received from the province of Saskatchewan by May 1st. First reading of the mill rate bylaw will be May 17th. Finance will bring forward budget revisions for Council's consideration on the same date, May 17th. Second and third reading of the bylaw will be brought forward on June 7th, and that would incorporate any changes that Council approved from the budget. Tax notices are sent to the printer on the 10th of June. They will be mailed June 18th, and the first penalty date will be July 25th. Just to give the changes that we're bringing forward is we just changed the name from property tax penalty bylaw to tax penalty bylaw, and that's for consistency in definitions. We added additional clarification on the penalty date, as last year there was some confusion on when the penalties should take place. Proposal for the new penalty dates, and we're also repealing the old bylaw number 18-2019. This will allow so that we don't have to bring it back for council's approval. We first brought this forward on GPC February 22nd, and we brought it forward to a council meeting March 8th, where it received its first reading. Our options that council approve all motions as indicated in the recommendation above. 2, that council not approve bylaw number 6/2021, or 3, that council request further information be brought forward to a future council meeting. I'll pass it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Scott. Questions or comments? I guess not having the calendar in front of us, we're good with the council meeting then on June 7th as well as May 17th. Is that just with administration to confirm we've got both of those dates right for council meetings?
We checked.
We did check? Okay, I just want to be sure. I don't want to set a date and then have nobody show up. From that perspective. Okay, no, that would be my only concern. I know that because of moving it, anytime we move it, it moves council dates, so potentially. Councillor Torson.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Given this is the third time we've seen this item and no changes have been made, once again, I would like to make the motion that council grant second reading to bylaw number 6-2021, the tax penalty bylaw.
Thank you, Councillor. Seconded by Councillor Buckingham. Any further discussion on that, discussion on that question before I call for it? Not seeing any, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Torson.
I move that council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 6-2021, the tax penalty bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Buckingham, thank you very much for your seconding. Again, I'll call for any questions or comments before I call for the question. Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott. Moving on to item 8.3, I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For 8.3, bylaw number 7-2021, SDAB final readings, our board final readings. I'll ask the city clerk, Doug Rodwell, to present.
City clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this recommendation is providing the second and third reading to bylaw number 7-2021, the subdivision development and appeal board bylaw. The subdivision development appeal board bylaw number 24-2016 was approved on August 23rd, 2016. An amendment to the bylaw was approved on May 17th, 2018. And as per the governance document review schedule, the bylaw was scheduled for review this year. Administration had reviewed the document and had made some proposed changes, the addition of several definitions that clarifies terms throughout the document, 2 additional board members to increase the total number of the appeal board members from 5 to 7, an increase in remuneration for appeal board members that is consistent with other municipalities of similar size, and the appeal board members are paid to attend training required to sit on the board. Administration has brought this item forward on February 22nd and March 8th of this year, and there has been no changes to the bylaw since its first reading. I pass it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, City Clerk. I'll look for any comments or questions. Not seeing any. Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to make the motion that Council grant second reading to bylaw number 7-2021, the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board bylaw.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Torreson. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the motion on hand? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move that Council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 7-2021, the Subdivision and Development Appeal Board bylaw.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Diachak. Thank you very much. Any further discussion on the third reading? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, City Clerk. Moving on to item number 9, Mayor and Council reports. My report is attached. Certainly not the standard thing you'll see in these reports is virtual meeting after virtual meeting. We continue to have meetings online with various individuals and groups attending various sessions, including AUMA training, which some of the members of council has also joined recently. So that's terrific. We continue to hold weekly meetings with the Minister of Government Relations to discuss COVID items within our community and other cities across Saskatchewan. From that perspective, again, I encourage the public to just watch the SHA announcements. I know the city's been supporting keeping people up to date as the vaccine continues to roll out, moving through the various ages, and from that perspective. So as anyone that follows the news knows, it's an up and down yo-yo with the supply chain of vaccines, and we see changes continuously, but just keep an eye on the media, social media. And for those that are watching and have family and friends that may not have access to social media, would encourage them to keep them informed. Certainly SHA has tried very hard to reach out to people by telephone, but if they were missed, please mention to your neighbors the 1-800 number that's available, or they can help them go online at your convenience to have them connect to receive a vaccination if that's what they so wish. Other than that, I have nothing else to report. And anyone around the table have anything to report as council? Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to point out the Border City Connects Polar Splash, which is happening. And between a couple members of this council, they've committed to 30% of the team's fundraising goal for Border City Connects, with His Worship doing $2,000 to get His Worship to make a big plunge, which is 10% of the $20,000 fundraising goal. So listed on Border City Connect's website, you'll find His Worship's name. You'll see my name at $1,000 goal, and you can choose to sponsor one of us or anybody else to help Border City Connects get their $20,000 fundraising goal met.
Thank you, Councillor, for reminding me about that pledge that I've made. So we're still working on a location and details, but stay tuned. I'm sure that will be fully brought to everybody's attention.
I'm sure now that we've said that you're in for it, that there will be tons of suggestions for you.
Oh, I'm sure there will be. No shortage, from getting dropped on from a wheel loader to a track hose, scooping a bucket, to whatever they might decide to deliver. So, any other comments from council? With not seeing any, I will ask for a motion to recess.
I'll take that.
Oh, pardon me? Oh, pardon me, right, skipped one. Inquiries from the media. Thank you. I did, before I go too far, there was any other matters. There was nothing listed, but I apologize, I did neglect to call that one. All right, with that, I will look for a motion to recess. Councillor Diachak, seconded by? Oh, pardon me, Councillor Whiting?
I tried to sneak in there to get my name on the agenda.
Well, you can second that one. Oh, you'll withdraw? Okay, you can, would you like to make that motion, Councillor?
I would like to make that motion.
Thank you. Seconder? Councilor Diachuk, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.